She rolled back her sleeve and the coffee shop went silent. Burn scars covered her arm like a road map of survival, twisted, angry, permanent. "This is why I'm alone," Harper whispered. "This is why everyone leaves." But the exhausted single father sitting across from her didn't flinch. Instead, he reached out and gently pulled her sleeve back down, not to hide her, but to stop her from testing him. "I'm not going anywhere," Ethan said. "I'm here to stay." What happened next would change both of their lives forever. If you want to see how two broken people learn to love again, stay with me until the very end. Hit that like button and comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The alarm screamed at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before Ethan Cole actually needed to wake up. He'd set it that way on purpose 3 years ago, back when he still believed those extra minutes might be used for something. A shower that lasted longer than 4 minutes, maybe a cup of coffee he could actually taste. Perhaps even a moment of stillness before the chaos began. But somewhere along the way, those 13 minutes had become just another pocket of time he spent staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the plaster, and wondering when exactly his life had narrowed down to this. The bedroom was dark except for the thin blade of streetlight cutting through the gap in the curtains. Portland rain tapped against the window like impatient fingers. The same rain that had been falling for 6 days straight. The same rain that made every job site a muddy nightmare. The same rain that seemed to have taken up permanent residence in his chest. Ethan was 34 years old, and he felt like 60. He reached over to silence the alarm, his hand brushing against the empty side of the bed. Cold sheets. They were always cold now. He'd stopped sleeping in the middle of the mattress 2 years ago, still unconsciously leaving room for someone who was never coming back. Old habits. Muscle memory. The body remembers what the heart tries to forget. "Daddy?" The small voice came from the doorway, and Ethan's chest immediately loosened. He pushed himself up on one elbow, squinting through the darkness at the tiny silhouette standing in the hall. "Hey, little man, you're up early." Oliver padded across the carpet in his dinosaur pajamas, the ones with the T-Rex that Ethan had to wash twice a week, because they were the only ones his son would wear. At 4 years old, Oliver had already developed strong opinions about approximately everything: which cup he drank from, which spoon he used, which exact spot on the couch was his spot, and absolutely non-negotiably, which pajamas touched his body. "I heard the beeping," Oliver said, climbing onto the bed with the graceless determination of a toddler. He burrowed under the covers next to Ethan, his cold little feet pressing against Ethan's thigh. "The beeping woke me up." "Woke," Ethan corrected automatically, wrapping an arm around his son. "The beeping woke you up." "That's what I said." "Sure you did." Oliver's small body was warm against Ethan's side, and for just a moment, maybe 30 seconds, maybe a full minute, the weight in Ethan's chest lifted. This was the good part. This was the reason he got out of bed every morning, drove through Portland traffic to job sites that paid barely enough, came home with aching shoulders and wire-stripped fingers, heated up whatever frozen meal was cheapest that week, and did it all over again the next day. This 4-year-old boy with his mother's eyes and his father's stubborn jaw. This small, perfect human who still believed his daddy could fix anything. "Can we have pancakes?" Oliver mumbled against Ethan's chest. "It's Tuesday, buddy. Pancakes are for weekends." "But I want pancakes." "I know, but we've got to get you to Miss Diane's and Daddy's got to get to work." Oliver's sigh was theatrical, the kind of world-weary exhale that suggested he'd already lived through several lifetimes of disappointment. "Work is boring." "You're not wrong about that." Ethan let himself hold his son for another minute, breathing in the little kid smell of him, strawberry shampoo, and the faint sweetness of sleep. Then reality intruded the way it always did, and he was pushing back the covers, swinging his legs over the edge of the bed, reaching for the jeans he'd thrown over the chair the night before. The morning routine was a machine he'd built through trial and error, a carefully timed sequence of steps that left no room for deviation. Get Oliver dressed. 10 minutes, plus another 5 for negotiations about which shirt he would wear. Make breakfast. Cereal and banana, no time for anything else. Pack Oliver's bag, extra clothes, his stuffed elephant Mr. Trumpet, the permission slip for whatever field trip was happening this week. Get himself ready. Work boots, flannel shirt, the canvas jacket with the fraying cuffs he kept meaning to replace. By 7:15 they were in the truck, an old F-150 that had been his father's, now held together by rust and stubbornness, and pulling out of the narrow driveway of the duplex Ethan rented on the east side of the city. The rain had softened to a drizzle, misting the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. Oliver was in his car seat, clutching Mr. Trumpet and humming a song Ethan didn't recognize, probably something from whatever cartoon Miss Diane let the kids watch during afternoon quiet time. "Daddy, why does the rain fall down?" "Because that's how gravity works. Things fall down, not up." "But why?" "Because that's the rule." "But who made the rule?" Ethan glanced in the rearview mirror at his son's curious face. This was the thing about 4-year-olds. They asked questions that seemed simple but actually required a PhD in physics to answer properly. He'd learned to deflect. "I'll tell you when you're older." "You always say that." "Because you're always younger than you will be." Oliver considered this for a moment, then went back to humming. Miss Diane ran a small, in-home daycare 3 blocks from the elementary school. A cheerful woman in her 60s who had raised 4 kids of her own and now spent her retirement wrangling other people's children for a fee that was just barely within Ethan's budget. She met them at the door in her trademark apron. Today's design featured cartoon coffee cups and the words, "Don't talk to me until this is empty," and immediately dropped into a crouch to receive Oliver's hug. "There's my favorite dinosaur expert. Did you know we're doing a special project today, painting volcanoes?" Oliver's eyes went wide. "Real volcanoes?" "Well, paper ones, but we're going to make them erupt with baking soda and vinegar." "That's chemistry," Oliver announced, the word coming out as chemistry. He'd learned it from a library book Ethan had checked out last month. "Daddy, it's chemistry." "Very impressive," Miss Diane said, winking at Ethan over Oliver's head. "Your daddy's raising a little scientist." Ethan managed a tired smile. "As long as he's not raising my blood pressure, I'll take it." He crouched down to Oliver's level, fixing the collar of his jacket and pressing a kiss to his forehead. "Be good today, okay? Listen to Miss Diane. I'll pick you up at 5. 5 o'clock, Oliver repeated solemnly, like they were synchronizing watches for a military operation. "That's right. Love you, Daddy." "Love you more, little man." Ethan watched him disappear into Miss Diane's warm, cluttered living room, then turned back to his truck. He had 45 minutes to get across town to the job site, and Portland traffic was going to make that interesting. The job was a renovation on a Victorian in the Alberta Arts District, one of those old beauties with good bones but decades of electrical work done by people who had never heard of building codes. Ethan had been rewiring houses for 12 years, first as an apprentice under his uncle, then as a licensed electrician who'd built enough of a reputation to stay consistently busy, if not exactly comfortable. His crew today was just 2 guys, Marcus, who was pushing 50 and had forearms like ship cables, and Danny, a 23-year-old apprentice who asked too many questions but showed up on time and didn't complain. That already put him ahead of 90% of the young guys who drifted through the trade. Ethan spent the morning crawling through the Victorian's cramped attic, stripping out knob and tube wiring that should have been replaced 40 years ago, his headlamp cutting through dust motes that swirled like tiny ghosts. The work was physical and demanding in a way he'd once found satisfying. Now it was just work, something his body knew how to do while his mind drifted elsewhere. He thought about the electric bill sitting on his kitchen counter, the crack in the truck's windshield that was slowly spreading, Oliver's upcoming dental appointment, the empty refrigerator, the way his son had asked about pancakes this morning, and the way Ethan had said no because there wasn't time, because there was never time, because his entire life had become a series of things he didn't have time for. By noon, his shoulders were screaming and his back felt like someone had taken a baseball bat to it. He climbed down from the attic, peeled off his work gloves, and sat on the porch steps to eat the sandwich he'd thrown together that morning, peanut butter and jelly, because that was what was in the cabinet. Marcus dropped down next to him, cracking open a can of Dr. Pepper and taking a long drink. They'd worked together for 8 years, and their friendship had evolved into something comfortable and wordless, built on shared silences and the occasional grunt of acknowledgement. "You look like hell," Marcus observed. "Thanks. I was going for worse." "You sleeping?" "Some. Oliver's been waking up at night again. Bad dreams, he says. Won't tell me what they're about." Marcus nodded slowly. He had 3 grown kids and 2 grandchildren, and he'd seen Ethan through every stage of the last 4 years: the divorce, the custody battle, the daily grind of single parenthood. He never offered advice unless asked, which was one of the reasons Ethan trusted him. Kid probably just misses his mom. Ethan's jaw tightened. She's got him 1 weekend a month, her choice. I know. So if he misses her, that's on her, not on me. I know that too. Ethan stared at his sandwich, suddenly not hungry. The truth was more complicated, as truth usually is. Sophie had left when Oliver was barely 1, overwhelmed by motherhood and a marriage that had never quite found its footing. The divorce had been bitter, but brief. Ethan had gotten primary custody because Sophie asked for it that way. She'd needed space to figure herself out, she'd said. 3 years later, she was living in Seattle with a new boyfriend, showing up for her court-mandated weekends with Oliver like it was an obligation rather than a gift. Ethan didn't hate her. He'd burned through his anger years ago, and now all that was left was a dull ache where the love used to be. But some nights, when Oliver woke up crying for no reason, when the boy asked why his friends had mommies who lived with them, and he didn't, when the silence of their small duplex felt like a physical weight, those nights, Ethan came close to hating her. You need to get out more, Marcus said. Ethan snorted. Yeah, let me just check my calendar. Between the 6 a.m. wake-ups and the falling asleep on the couch by 9, I've got tons of free time. I'm serious. When's the last time you did something for yourself? Something that wasn't about work or the kid? Ethan opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. He genuinely couldn't remember. There had to have been something. A beer with a friend, a movie, an hour spent doing anything other than working or parenting. But the memories all blurred together, one gray day bleeding into the next. See? Marcus shook his head. That's not healthy, brother. You're going to burn out. I'm fine. You're surviving. There's a difference. The words hit harder than Ethan expected, settling somewhere beneath his ribs like a stone. He finished his sandwich in silence and went back to work. The call came at 4:37 p.m. While Ethan was in the middle of explaining to Danny why you never hotwired a circuit without turning off the breaker first. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he glanced at the screen to see a name that made his shoulders tense. Tyler Chen. They'd been friends since high school, roommates in that shitty apartment after graduation, groomsmen at each other's weddings. Tyler was the one who'd helped Ethan move into the duplex after the divorce, who'd brought over pizza and beer on the nights when the loneliness got too loud. But somewhere along the way, the calls had become less frequent. Ethan's fault, mostly. He'd stopped answering, stopped showing up, stopped having the energy for anything beyond the basics. He answered anyway. Hello? Oh my God, he lives. Tyler's voice was the same as always, warm, teasing, impossible to resist. I was starting to think you died and nobody told me. Just busy. You're always busy? That's kind of my point. There was a pause, and when Tyler spoke again, his tone had shifted. Less joking, more concerned. Ethan, how long has it been since we actually hung out? Ethan did the math. I don't know. 6 months? 8. It's been 8 months, man. I had to check my calendar to make sure I wasn't crazy, but no. 8 months since I've seen my best friend face to face. Guilt twisted in Ethan's stomach. Tyler, you're disappearing. The words were blunt, stripped of their usual humor. I mean that. You're disappearing into that routine of yours, and I'm watching it happen, and I don't know how to stop it. I call, and you're too tired. I invite you out, and you've got Oliver. I try to show up, and you cancel at the last minute. It's like you're trying to become invisible. Ethan closed his eyes. Across the room, Danny was pretending not to listen while doing a very poor job of it. I'm not trying to do anything. I'm just keeping my head above water. But that's all you're doing, Ethan. Keeping your head above water. And eventually, that's not enough. Eventually, you've got to swim towards something. Otherwise, what's the point? The question hung in the air between them, and Ethan didn't have an answer. Tyler sighed. Look, I'm not trying to lecture you. I just miss my friend, and I'm worried about him, and I have an idea that I need you to not immediately say no to. I'm already going to say no. See, that's what I mean. That's exactly what I mean. Tyler's voice was firm now, the way it got when he'd made up his mind about something and wasn't backing down. Here's what's going to happen. This Saturday, you're going to get a babysitter. I can't afford a babysitter. Which is why my sister already offered to watch Oliver, free of charge. She loves that kid, and she's been asking about him anyway. Ethan's protest died in his throat. Tyler, this Saturday, you're going to put on a clean shirt that doesn't have drywall dust on it, and you're going to go to Bloom Coffee House on Hawthorne at 2 p.m. And you're going to meet a woman I know named Harper, who is one of the kindest, most genuine people I've ever met, and who also happens to be going through her own version of what you're going through. You're setting me up on a blind date? I'm setting you up on a coffee date. 1 hour. That's all I'm asking. 60 minutes out of your carefully constructed routine of misery. It's not misery. Ethan, I love you like a brother, but you're lying right now, and we both know it. The silence stretched for a long moment. Ethan thought about all the ways he could refuse, all the excuses he could make. Too tired, too busy, not ready, not interested, not capable of being anything other than Oliver's dad and a guy who ran wires through walls. But Tyler was right. He'd been disappearing, one day at a time, one night on the couch, one declined invitation after another. He'd been slowly fading into the wallpaper of his own life, and he hadn't even noticed it happening. 1 hour? 1 hour. You don't like her. You don't have to see her again. You get uncomfortable, you can leave. No pressure, no expectations, no strings. Just coffee. With another human being, because you used to be good at that, remember? You used to actually like people. Ethan ran a hand over his face. I don't even know how to do this anymore, Tyler. I don't know how to talk to someone without it being about wire gauges or what Oliver ate for breakfast. That's okay. Neither does she, probably. That's kind of the point. Tyler's voice softened. Just show up, man. That's all I'm asking. Show up and prove to me. Prove to yourself that you're still in there somewhere. That you're not just going through the motions until you die. The words were harsh, but they came from a place of love. Ethan could hear it, and maybe that was why they cut so deep. Saturday at 2, Bloom Coffee House on Hawthorne. She'll be the one with the nervous look on her face. How will she know who I am? I sent her your picture. Don't worry, it was a good one. You almost looked like you weren't dead inside. Despite himself, Ethan laughed. It was a rough, rusty sound, like machinery that hadn't been used in too long. Thanks for that. Thank me after you have a good time. I'll text you the details. And Ethan? Yeah? I'm proud of you for saying yes. The call ended and Ethan stood there for a moment, phone still in his hand. Across the room, Danny was watching him with barely concealed curiosity. Hot date, boss? Mind your own business and go check the sub panel. But as Danny scurried away, Ethan caught himself doing something he hadn't done in a long time. He was looking forward to something. Hot date. The week crawled by in its usual parade of work and parenting and exhaustion, but there was something different now. A small spark of anticipation that Ethan couldn't quite extinguish, no matter how many times he told himself this was probably a terrible idea. He didn't tell Oliver about the coffee date, didn't want to explain what a date was, didn't want to answer the inevitable questions about whether this meant he was getting a new mommy. Tyler's sister Jenny came over Saturday morning, all smiles and enthusiasm, and Oliver took to her immediately, probably because she brought a bag full of dinosaur coloring books and promised they could make real explosions with Mentos and Diet Coke in the backyard. You look nervous, Jenny observed as Ethan gathered his keys. I'm not nervous. You've checked your reflection in the microwave 3 times. Ethan felt his face heat. I was looking at something behind me. Sure you were. She grinned, and for a moment she looked exactly like Tyler. That same knowing expression, that same warmth. Go, have fun. Remember what fun feels like. I know what fun feels like. When's the last time you had some? He didn't answer because the honest answer was too depressing. Instead, he kissed Oliver goodbye, reminded him to listen to Jenny, and walked out to his truck with his heart hammering in his chest like he was 16 years old and going to his first high school dance. Bloom Coffee House was one of those Portland establishments that seemed to have been decorated by someone who'd ingested a significant quantity of mushrooms. The walls were covered in local art, some of it beautiful, some of it aggressively weird. Mismatched furniture was scattered around in clusters that somehow worked, The coffee smelled incredible, and the barista had a septum piercing and a genuinely friendly smile. Ethan arrived at 1:47 p.m. because he was always early, because being early was something he could control. He ordered a black coffee, not because he liked it black, but because he didn't know what else to order and didn't want to seem indecisive, and found a table near the window where he could watch the door. Then he waited. At 1:52, a woman walked in, and his entire nervous system went haywire. She was early 30s, he guessed, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and a face that was pretty in an understated way, the kind of face that probably got more beautiful the longer you looked at it. She was wearing a blue sweater that looked soft and comfortable, jeans and boots that had seen some actual use, no makeup that he could tell, or maybe just the kind of makeup that was designed to look like no makeup. Her posture was careful, contained, like she was bracing herself for something. Their eyes met across the coffee shop. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then she walked toward him, and Ethan stood up so fast he almost knocked over his coffee. "Ethan." Her voice was lower than he'd expected, warm but guarded, like she wasn't sure if she should be here. "Yeah, Harper." She nodded, and something in her shoulders seemed to loosen slightly. "I almost didn't come. I got to the door 3 times and turned around twice." Ethan huffed a surprised laugh. "I sat in my truck for 10 minutes trying to convince myself I wasn't going to throw up." The corner of her mouth twitched. "Romantic. I'm told I have a way with words." She slid into the seat across from him, and there was that moment, that terrible, awkward first date moment, where neither of them knew what to say. The silence stretched. Ethan's brain, which he usually counted on to produce at least moderately intelligent thoughts, had apparently decided to go on strike. "So," Harper said finally, wrapping her hands around the coffee she'd grabbed on her way to the table, "Tyler tells me you're an electrician." "Yeah, mostly residential stuff. Rewiring old houses, that kind of thing." "That sounds satisfying, working with your hands, seeing the results." "Sometimes. Other times it's crawling through attics full of rat droppings and finding out someone in 1970 thought aluminum wiring was a good idea." Harper winced sympathetically. "I'm a physical therapist, mostly orthopedic work, people recovering from surgeries, injuries, that kind of thing." "That's amazing. Helping people heal." "Sometimes. Other times it's convincing a 70-year-old man that yes, he really does need to do his exercises, even when they hurt, even when his grandson could do them better than he can." They smiled at each other, and something in the air shifted. A slight easing of tension, a mutual recognition that maybe this wasn't going to be as terrible as they'd both feared. "Tyler also mentioned you have a son," Harper said. "Oliver. He's 4, going on 40 based on the questions he asks." "What kind of questions?" "Yesterday he asked me why we can't see air. The day before that, he wanted to know if fish get thirsty." Ethan shook his head, feeling the familiar warmth that always came when he talked about his kid. "He's exhausting and amazing, and I have no idea what I'm doing. I think that's how all parenting works, from what I can tell." "Probably. I just wish someone had told me that before I signed up." Harper's smile flickered, and for just a moment Ethan caught something behind it. A shadow, a hurt. But before he could identify it, she was speaking again. "How long have you been doing this alone?" The question was gentle, but it still landed like a punch. Ethan took a sip of his terrible black coffee, buying time. 3 years. His mom left when he was 1. We share custody technically, but she's not around much. That must be hard. It's just life now. You get used to it. Or you learn to pretend you have. Harper nodded slowly, and there was something in her eyes that suggested she understood. Not just intellectually, but in the bone-deep way that only came from lived experience. They talked for a while longer, safe topics, surface things. She'd grown up in Portland, left for college in California, came back after her residency. He'd grown up in Gresham, never left except for a brief stint in community college that he'd dropped out of. She liked hiking, but never had time for it. He used to play guitar, but couldn't remember the last time he'd picked it up. They both agreed that Portland's weather was miserable and perfect in equal measure. It was nice, easy, almost. The kind of conversation that could have been happening between any 2 people getting to know each other. But something was off. Ethan could feel it, a wall between them. A careful distance that Harper maintained even as she smiled, even as she laughed at his jokes. Like she was holding something back, like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Finally, there was a lull in the conversation. Harper stared down at her coffee, tracing the rim of the cup with her finger. When she looked up again, her expression had changed. "Can I ask you something? Something real?" Ethan felt his pulse quicken. "Sure. Why did you really show up today?" The question hung in the air between them. Ethan could have given her the easy answer. Tyler asked me to, seemed rude to say no, thought it might be nice to meet someone. All true, all meaningless. But Harper was looking at him like she wanted the truth, like she needed it. So he gave it to her. "Because I'm tired," he said quietly. "I'm tired of being alone. I'm tired of coming home to silence after my kid falls asleep. I'm tired of going through the motions and calling it a life." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was rougher. "My best friend told me I was disappearing, and I think he's right. And I showed up today because, I don't know, because I wanted to prove I'm still here, that there's still something left." Harper's eyes had gone soft. She was watching him with an intensity that made him want to look away, but he didn't. "That's the first honest thing anyone said to me on a first date in years," she said. "Should I have led with something lighter? My horoscope says I'm compatible with Libras." She laughed, and it was a real laugh, surprised and genuine. "No. Honest is good. Honest is rare." They sat in that moment for a beat, and Ethan felt something shift between them. The wall was still there, but it had developed a crack. "Your turn," he said. "Why did you show up?" Harper's laugh faded. She was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was careful. "Because I'm tired too, and because Tyler is one of the few people who still bothers to set me up on dates, and I didn't want to disappoint him." She paused. "And because I thought, maybe this time would be different." "Different from what?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for her coffee, took a long sip, and set it back down. Her hands were trembling slightly, Ethan noticed. Barely perceptible, but there. "I should warn you about something," she said. "Okay. Once I show you, once you see who I really am, you'll probably leave. Most people do." Ethan frowned. "I don't understand." Harper took a breath. Then slowly, deliberately, she rolled back the sleeve of her blue sweater. The scars started just above her wrist and disappeared under the fabric, climbing up her forearm like the gnarled roots of some terrible tree. Burn scars. The kind that didn't fade. The kind that told a story of fire and pain and survival. The skin was twisted, discolored, mottled in shades of pink and white that stood out against her natural complexion. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Harper's face was calm, but her eyes were watching him, waiting, bracing for the moment he would look away, the moment he would make an excuse, the moment he would check his phone and suddenly remember an appointment he'd forgotten. "There's more," she said quietly. "My arm, my shoulder, part of my back. A fire 4 years ago. I was lucky to survive." The coffee shop continued around them. The hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of other conversations, the clinking of cups, but in their small corner of the world, everything had gone still. Ethan looked at the scars. He looked at Harper. He saw the way she was holding herself, spine straight, chin lifted, like a soldier awaiting a verdict. And then, gently, he reached across the table. Harper flinched slightly as his fingers touched her sleeve. But he didn't touch the scars. He didn't stare at them. He simply took the edge of her sleeve and pulled it back down, covering her arm. "What are you doing?" Harper's voice was barely a whisper. "Stopping you from testing me." "I wasn't—" "Yeah, you were. And I get it. I do. But you don't have to." Ethan held her gaze, and when he spoke, he meant every word. "I'm not going anywhere, Harper. I'm here to stay." Harper stared at him. For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe. Then her eyes filled with tears. "You don't know what you're saying," she whispered. "You don't know what it's like, the looks, the questions, the way people avoid touching you, the way they pretend not to see, but you can feel them seeing. You're right. I don't know what that's like." Ethan's voice was steady, even as his heart hammered in his chest. But I know what it's like to feel invisible. I know what it's like to think no one will ever really see you again. And I know that I walked in here today expecting nothing, and instead I found someone who asked me an honest question and actually wanted the honest answer." Harper wiped at her eyes, a small, embarrassed laugh escaping her. "This is not how first dates usually go." "I wouldn't know. This is my first one in 3 years. You're doing okay for someone out of practice." "I'm terrified." "Me too." They sat there, looking at each other across the table. Two people who had walked in expecting nothing and found something unexpected instead. Two people carrying their own invisible scars, hers written on her skin, his carved into his heart. "So what happens now?" Harper asked. Ethan considered the question. The responsible answer was probably something about taking it slow, not rushing into anything, protecting himself and his son from the inevitable disappointment that came with letting someone in. But he was so tired of being responsible, so tired of protecting himself from everything, including the possibility of happiness. "Now," he said, "you tell me about the fire, if you want to, and I'll tell you about my son and my ex-wife and all the ways I'm barely holding it together, and we'll see if there's something here worth exploring." "That's very brave of you." "Not brave, just desperate." Harper smiled, a real smile, one that transformed her face into something luminous. "I think I like desperate." "Good, because I've got plenty of it." She laughed again, and this time the sound warmed something in Ethan's chest that had been cold for a very long time. Outside, the Portland rain continued to fall. Inside Bloom Coffee House, two broken people began the slow, terrifying process of letting someone in. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't disappearing after all. Berschen. They talked until this coffee grew cold, and the afternoon light shifted from gray to grayer. Harper told him about the fire, a kitchen accident in the apartment she'd been renting, a grease fire that spread too fast, her instinctive attempt to smother it with a towel that was already burning. She told him about the hospital, the surgeries, the skin grafts that had taken months to heal. She told him about the therapist who'd helped her through the worst of the trauma and the ones who hadn't. She told him about the looks on people's faces when they saw her scars for the first time. The pity, the curiosity, the way some people actually stepped back, as if what she had was contagious. The worst part, she said, wasn't the pain. The pain was terrible, but it ended eventually. The worst part was afterward. Realizing that I would never look the same again. That every relationship, every date, every intimate moment would start with this reveal, this test. Would they stay or would they go? And most of them go? Most of them, she said it flatly, without self-pity. Not always right away. Sometimes they stick around for a few weeks, try to convince themselves it doesn't matter, but eventually they leave. And the ones who stay, she shrugged. I haven't found one of those yet. Ethan thought about that. Thought about what it would mean to love someone who came with visible scars, permanent reminders of trauma. He thought about his own invisible wounds, the divorce, the loneliness, the slow erosion of his sense of self. Different in kind, maybe, but not in weight. I don't know if I'm going to be one of the ones who stays, he said honestly. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I'm not leaving because of some scars. That's what everyone says at first. Maybe, but I'm also not everyone. Harper studied him for a long moment. No, she said finally. I don't think you are. It was nearly 5 o'clock when they finally stood to leave. The coffee shop had emptied and refilled around them, and Ethan realized with a start that they'd been talking for almost 3 hours. I have to pick up Oliver, he said, checking his phone. Tyler's sister is probably starting to wonder if I got abducted. Or if the date went well enough that you forgot you have a child. I would never forget Oliver. I know, that's obvious actually, the way you talk about him. Harper paused. It's one of the things I like about you, that you haven't lost yourself completely in being a parent. Some people do, you know. They become only mom or dad, and the rest of them just disappears. But you're still in there. I can see it. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. It was the opposite of what Tyler had told him, that he was disappearing. Maybe they were both right. Maybe he was still there, just buried under layers of exhaustion and obligation. Can I see you again? The words came out before he could second guess them. Harper's smile was cautious but real. I'd like that. Nothing fancy. I'm not a fancy kind of guy. Maybe a walk in the park if the rain ever stops. The rain never stops in Portland. Then we'll get wet. She laughed, and he felt that warmth again, spreading through his chest like a slow sunrise. They exchanged phone numbers, actual phone numbers, not social media handles, and walked out of the coffee shop together. The rain had stopped, temporarily at least. The street was wet and glistening, reflecting the lights from the shops along Hawthorne. Harper turned to face him, and there was a moment where neither of them knew how to say goodbye. Thank you, she said, for not leaving. Thank you for showing me. She hesitated, then rose on her toes and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. Her lips were soft, and she smelled like coffee and something floral. Then she was stepping back, pulling her jacket tighter around her. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Harper. He watched her walk down the street until she turned a corner and disappeared. Then he stood there for a few more seconds, breathing in the damp Portland air, feeling something shift in his chest. Not quite hope, but something adjacent to it. Something that had been dormant for a long time, slowly waking up. His phone buzzed. A text from Tyler. So? How was it? Do I need to plan a wedding or a funeral? Ethan smiled and typed back, neither, but maybe a second date. The response came immediately. That's my boy. I knew you still had it in you. Ethan pocketed his phone and walked to his truck. The evening air was cool against his face, and for once, the coldness didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like possibility. He drove across town to Tyler's sister's place, where Oliver was waiting on the porch with chocolate around his mouth and a crayon drawing clutched in his fist. Daddy? Daddy, look! I made you a picture! Ethan crouched down to receive the drawing, a chaotic swirl of colors that might have been a dinosaur, or might have been a volcano, or might have been a representation of Oliver's inner emotional landscape. It was perfect. This is amazing, little man. Tell me about it. It's a T-Rex fighting a volcano. The volcano tried to eat him, but the T-Rex said no and breathed fire back. T-Rexes don't breathe fire, buddy. This one does, because he's special. Ethan looked at his son, chocolate-smeared, crayon-wielding, absolutely certain that his dinosaur could do impossible things, and felt his heart crack open a little more. Yeah, he said quietly. I guess he is. He thanked Jenny, strapped Oliver into his car seat, and drove home through the wet Portland streets. Oliver talked the entire way, about the Mentos explosion, about the coloring books, about how Jenny let him have 2 cookies instead of 1, but he wasn't supposed to tell Daddy that part. Ethan listened and nodded and made the appropriate sounds of amazement, while somewhere in the back of his mind, he was still thinking about Harper, about the way she'd braced herself for rejection, about the way she'd shown him her scars like she was handing him a weapon, waiting to see if he would use it against her, about the way her eyes had softened when he'd pulled her sleeve back down. He was still thinking about her when he put Oliver to bed, when he heated up leftover pizza for dinner, when he sat on the couch in the silence of his empty living room. But tonight, the silence felt different, less like a weight and more like a space that might, someday, be filled. His phone buzzed again, a text from a number he didn't recognize that then immediately realized he did. Harper. I just wanted to say thank you again. Tonight was unexpected. In the best way. Sleep well, Ethan. He stared at the message for a long moment, feeling something unfamiliar in his chest, something that felt dangerously like happiness. Ethan, thank you for giving me a chance. Sleep well, Harper. He set the phone down, leaned back against the couch, and for the first time in 3 years, didn't turn on the TV. Instead, he sat in the quiet and let himself feel. And somewhere across town, in an apartment she'd carefully made her own, Harper Lane was doing the same thing, staring at her phone, touching her scarred arm through her sleeve, and wondering if maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. The story was just beginning. The days that followed moved differently than Ethan had grown accustomed to. Time had always felt like something to survive. Wake up, get through it, collapse, repeat. But now there was a texture to his hours that hadn't been there before, a sense of anticipation that colored even the mundane moments with something approaching brightness. He and Harper texted every day. Small things at first. Good morning messages, random observations about their work, the kind of low-stakes exchanges that felt safe. She sent him a photo of a patient's dog who had wandered into the clinic, a scruffy terrier with one ear that stood up and one that flopped down. He sent her a picture of Oliver's latest crayon masterpiece, which allegedly depicted Daddy fighting a cloud monster. She responded with a string of laughing emojis, breaking her apparent rule about emoji usage, and something warm spread through Ethan's chest. It was such a small thing, such an ordinary thing. But after 3 years of silence, of conversations that never went beyond the transactional, it felt like rediscovering a language he'd forgotten he knew. Their second date happened on a Thursday evening, a week after that first coffee. Harper had suggested a walk in Laurelhurst Park, one of Portland's older green spaces with winding paths and a spring-fed pond that attracted ducks and joggers in equal measure. The rain had held off for once, leaving behind that particular northwest freshness. Everything washed clean, the air carrying hints of pine and wet earth. Ethan had arranged for Tyler's sister Jenny to watch Oliver again, though he'd insisted on paying her this time, despite her protests. The guilt of leaving his son twice in 1 week sat heavy in his stomach, but Jenny had waved it away. "He loves it here," she'd said, ruffling Oliver's hair. "And you need this. Don't argue with me." Harper was waiting near the park entrance when Ethan arrived, wearing jeans and a gray jacket, her dark hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back. She looked different this way, softer somehow, less guarded. Though when she spotted him and smiled, there was still that flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, that bracing for disappointment. "You came," she said. "Was there any doubt?" "There's always doubt." They fell into step together on one of the gravel paths that wound through the park. The evening light was fading toward gold, casting long shadows across the grass. Other people moved around them, a woman pushing a stroller, a couple walking a greyhound, a group of teenagers sprawled on a blanket near the pond, but they all felt distant, background noise. "How was your day?" Ethan asked. "Long. Good, but long. I had a patient today, a teenager who blew out his ACL playing soccer. He's been working with me for 3 months now, and today he finally managed a full squat without wincing." Harper's face lit up as she talked, animation replacing her usual careful composure. It sounds small, but for him it was huge. His whole face just transformed, like he remembered what it felt like to trust his body again. "That's what you love about it, isn't it? Those moments." "Yeah." She glanced at him, something like surprise in her expression. "Most people don't get that. They think physical therapy is just exercises and stretches. But it's really about helping people believe they can heal. The body stuff is almost secondary." "Sounds like being a parent." "How so?" Ethan considered the question as they walked. "Oliver's at this age where he's figuring out what he can do. Climbing things, running, trying to pour his own juice even though it always ends in disaster. And my job isn't really to teach him how to do those things. He's going to figure that out regardless. My job is to make him believe he can, to catch him when he falls and convince him to try again." Harper was quiet for a moment. "That's a beautiful way to think about it." "It's also terrifying, because what if I convince him he can do something and then he gets hurt? What if I'm the reason he falls?" "You can't think like that." "I know, but I do, all the time." Ethan shoved his hands in his jacket pockets, suddenly feeling exposed. "Single-parent brain, I guess. You're the only safety net, so you're constantly calculating risks. What if I get sick? What if I get hurt on a job site? What if something happens to me and he's alone?" "He wouldn't be alone. He has people who love him." "Yeah, but he wouldn't have me. And I'm not sure I know who I am without being his dad anymore." The words hung in the evening air between them. Ethan hadn't meant to say something so raw, so unguarded, but there was something about Harper that made honesty feel necessary, like she would see through anything less. They reached the pond and stopped near the edge, watching the ducks glide across the darkening water. The last of the sunset painted the surface gold and pink. "Can I tell you something?" Harper asked. "Anything." When you said that about not knowing who you are without being a parent, I understood it completely. She paused, her eyes fixed on the water. After the fire, I spent months in recovery, surgeries, skin grafts, physical therapy of my own. And during that time, I lost everything I thought made me who I was. I couldn't work, couldn't socialize, couldn't even look at myself in the mirror without feeling like a stranger was staring back. Ethan stayed silent, letting her speak. I used to be someone who drew people in, I guess. I was confident, outgoing, the kind of person who made friends easily, who dated casually, and never thought twice about showing skin in the summer. A bitter smile crossed her face. That sounds vain, doesn't it? It sounds human. Maybe. But all of that was tied to how I looked, how I moved through the world. And when that changed, when these scars became part of me, I had to figure out who I was underneath all of it. What was left when you stripped away the surface? What did you find? Harper finally looked at him, and in the fading light, her eyes were luminous with something he couldn't quite name. I'm still figuring that out, but I found that I'm stronger than I thought, that I can survive things I never imagined surviving. And that, she hesitated, that I'm terrified of letting anyone close enough to see the parts I haven't figured out yet. I'm terrified too, Ethan said quietly. Of what? Of wanting something again, of letting myself hope. He turned to face her fully, the gravel crunching under his boots. After Sophie left, I built this wall around myself. Not because I was angry at her. I was. But that burned out eventually. I built it because wanting things hurt too much. It was easier to just exist, go through the motions, not hope for anything beyond getting through the next day. And now? Now I'm standing in a park with a woman who showed me her scars on the first date, and I'm thinking about how much I want to see her again, and again after that. And it's terrifying because I don't know how to want things anymore without waiting for them to be taken away. Harper's hand found his in the darkness between them. Her fingers were cool, her grip tentative, like she was ready to let go at the first sign of resistance. But Ethan held on. Maybe we can be terrified together, she said. I'd like that. They stood there as the last light faded and the park lights flickered on, two people holding hands by the edge of a pond, both of them bruised by life in different ways, both of them reaching toward something they weren't sure they deserved. It was Harper who finally spoke, breaking the spell. Tell me about Oliver. Not the dad stuff. You've told me that. Tell me about him. What makes him laugh? What does he dream about? What's he afraid of? Ethan felt himself smile, the expression coming easier than it had in months. He's afraid of the vacuum cleaner, convinced it's going to eat his socks. Harper laughed. That's very specific. He saw me vacuum up one of his socks once. It was an accident. The thing just got sucked in before I could grab it. And now he hides all his socks when I clean. I find them in the weirdest places. Behind the couch, in the refrigerator, under his pillow. The refrigerator? He's 4. Logic is not his strong suit. They started walking again, the path taking them in a slow loop around the pond. Ethan found himself talking more than he had in years, about Oliver's obsession with dinosaurs, about the way he talked to his stuffed elephant Mr. Trumpet like it was a real person, about the questions he asked that Ethan could never fully answer. Harper listened with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions, laughing at the funny parts. And then she asked the question he'd been dreading. What happened with his mom, if you don't mind me asking? Ethan's stride faltered slightly. I don't mind. It's just not a short story. We've got time. So he told her. About meeting Sophie in their early 20s, about the whirlwind romance that had felt like fate, about the wedding that had been small but full of hope, about the pregnancy that came earlier than planned, the stress that followed, the way parenthood had cracked open every fault line in their relationship. She wasn't ready, Ethan said. I thought I was, but I wasn't either. Not really. Nobody is. But I adapted. I figured it out. And he sighed. She couldn't. Every night she'd look at Oliver and I could see her retreating. Like motherhood was this trap she'd walked into and couldn't escape. Did she try to get help? Therapy? Support groups? I begged her to. She went to one session and never went back. Said the therapist didn't understand, said no one understood. Ethan's voice was flat, the emotion long since processed into something that resembled acceptance. A year after Oliver was born, she told me she needed space. She moved in with her sister at first, then to a friend's place, then to Seattle with some guy she met online. And Oliver? She signed over primary custody without a fight, said she loved him but couldn't be what he needed, that I was the better parent and she was only holding him back. Harper was quiet for a long moment. That must have hurt. It did. For a while I hated her for it. For leaving, for making me do this alone, for breaking our son's heart every time she promised to visit and then canceled. But then I realized the hate was just exhausting me. And Oliver didn't need a dad who was angry all the time. He needed a dad who showed up. So you let the anger go. I let it go, Ethan confirmed. Doesn't mean it didn't leave marks. Doesn't mean I trust easily anymore. But Oliver's better for it, and that's what matters. They had circled back to the park entrance. The evening had fully settled into night, the streetlights casting pools of yellow on the wet pavement. Harper stopped and turned to face him. You're a good father, Ethan. I'm trying. No, I mean it. What you've done, raising him alone, keeping your anger from poisoning him, showing up every day even when it's hard. That's not just trying, that's succeeding. Ethan felt something crack inside him at her words. A wall he didn't know was still standing. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for trusting me with it. They stood there in the space between the park and the parking lot, neither of them quite ready to end the evening. Ethan wanted to kiss her. The impulse was sudden and overwhelming, a physical pull toward this woman who had seen his wounds and stayed, who had shown him hers and trusted him to stay too. But something held him back, not uncertainty about his feelings. Those were becoming clearer by the minute, more like an awareness that Harper was still fragile in ways he couldn't fully see, that she needed time to trust that he wasn't going to run. So instead, he lifted his hand and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. When can I see you again? Her breath caught slightly at his touch. Sunday? I have the day off. Sunday. I'll figure out childcare. You could bring Oliver, Harper said, and the words came out hesitant, like she wasn't sure she had the right to offer them. If you want. I'd like to meet him. Ethan studied her face, searching for any sign that she was just being polite, but what he saw was genuine, if terrified. Harper wanted to meet his son. She wanted to step into his real life, not just the version he could present when Oliver was safely with a babysitter. Are you sure? He's a lot. And 4-year-olds don't have filters. He might say something about your arm. Kids notice things. I know. Harper's smile was small but steady. That's actually why I want to meet him. Kids are honest. If he's scared of me or uncomfortable around me, he won't pretend otherwise. And I think I need to know if I can handle that. Being around a child who sees my scars and reacts however he reacts. You don't have to test yourself like that. Maybe I want to. She reached out and took his hand again, squeezing gently. I've spent 4 years hiding from children because I was afraid of their reactions. Afraid they'd be scared of me or ask questions I couldn't answer. But if this is going somewhere, if we're going somewhere, I can't avoid your son forever. Better to find out now if I can do this than to get more attached and then discover I can't. Ethan turned her logic over in his mind. It made sense in a painful kind of way. Harper was protecting herself, but she was also being brave. Braver than he would be in her position. Okay, he said. Sunday, the 3 of us. Harper exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. Okay. He walked her to her car, a practical Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper that she'd explained away as a disagreement with a shopping cart. She unlocked it, but didn't get in, turning back to face him in the parking lot's dim light. Ethan? Yeah? I haven't felt like this in a long time. Hopeful, I mean. And it scares me, but... She paused, searching for the words. I'm glad Tyler set us up. I'm glad you showed up. I'm glad you didn't leave. I'm glad too. This time he did kiss her, just a soft press of his lips against her forehead, gentle and brief, a promise more than a demand. Harper's eyes fluttered closed at the contact, and when they opened again, They were bright with something he hoped was the same cautious hope he was feeling. "Good night, Harper." "Good night, Ethan." He watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing around the corner before walking to his own truck. The drive home was quiet, but his mind was full. He thought about Harper's scars and his own invisible ones. He thought about Oliver and how his son would react to this woman entering their carefully constructed world. He thought about all the ways this could go wrong: rejection, incompatibility, the simple erosion of feelings that happened when the newness wore off. But mostly, he thought about how long it had been since he'd felt anything at all, and how good it felt to feel something again, even if that something was terrifying. When he got home, Oliver was asleep on Jenny's lap, the TV playing some animated movie at low volume. Ethan lifted his son carefully, feeling the familiar weight of him, the complete trust of a sleeping child in his father's arms. "How'd it go?" Jenny whispered. "Good, really good." Her smile was knowing. "You've got that look." "What look?" "The look my brother had when he first started dating Maria, like someone turned the lights back on." Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he just thanked her and carried Oliver to bed. He tucked his son in, arranging Mr. Trumpet in the crook of his arm, and stood in the doorway for a moment watching him sleep. "I might have met someone, little man," he whispered to the darkness. "Someone who doesn't run away when things get hard. Someone who might actually stick around." He paused, feeling foolish for talking to a sleeping 4-year-old, but unable to stop. "I hope you like her. I really hope you like her." Oliver stirred, mumbling something unintelligible, then settled back into deep sleep. Ethan closed the door most of the way and went to the kitchen, where he found himself staring at the empty refrigerator without really seeing it. His phone buzzed. "Harper. I made it home safe. Thank you for tonight. Thank you for being patient with me." He typed back, "Thank you for being brave enough to let me in." Her response came a minute later. "I'm still terrified." "Me too," he wrote. "But it's the good kind of terrified." "The good kind," she agreed. "I didn't know there was a good kind until tonight." Ethan smiled at his phone like a teenager with a crush, feeling ridiculous and wonderful at the same time. He sent her a final message: "Sleep well, see you Sunday," and then forced himself to put the phone down. The apartment was quiet around him, the same silence he'd been drowning in for 3 years. But tonight, it didn't feel like drowning. It felt like floating, like the weight that had been pressing him down was finally, slowly, starting to lift. Sunday arrived faster than Ethan expected, and with it came a level of anxiety he hadn't anticipated. He'd told Oliver they were going to meet a friend at the park, keeping it vague, keeping expectations low, but his son had peppered him with questions anyway. "What kind of friend? A boyfriend or a girlfriend?" "A girlfriend. A woman, I mean. Someone Daddy knows." "Does she like dinosaurs?" "I don't know, buddy. You can ask her." "What if she doesn't like dinosaurs?" "Then you'll tell her all about them until she does." This had satisfied Oliver, who had spent the rest of the morning gathering his best dinosaurs, a collection of plastic figurines in various states of wear, to bring along for the introduction. Harper was waiting at the park when they arrived, sitting on a bench near the playground with her hands folded in her lap. She was wearing a long-sleeved shirt despite the mild weather, and Ethan understood why. She stood as they approached, her smile nervous but genuine. "Hi," she said. "Hi." Ethan could feel Oliver's hand tightening in his, the boy suddenly shy in the presence of a stranger. "Oliver, this is Harper. She's Daddy's friend." Harper crouched down to Oliver's level, which Ethan noted as exactly the right thing to do. "Hi, Oliver. Your daddy's told me a lot about you." Oliver studied her with the intense scrutiny only children could muster. "Do you like dinosaurs?" "I do, actually. Triceratops is my favorite." Oliver's eyes went wide. "That's the one with 3 horns." "Exactly. Do you have a favorite?" "T-Rex," Oliver said immediately, producing one of his plastic dinosaurs from the pocket of his jacket. "This is Rex. He's a good guy, even though he has big teeth. That's a very handsome T-Rex." Oliver beamed, and just like that, the ice was broken. He launched into an explanation of his dinosaur collection that Harper followed with what appeared to be genuine interest, asking questions and making appropriately impressed sounds at each new creature Oliver produced. Ethan watched them interact, something unfurling in his chest. He'd been so worried about this moment, about Oliver being scared or uncomfortable, about Harper being overwhelmed. But his son was chattering away like he'd known Harper his whole life, and Harper was listening like nothing in the world was more important than a 4-year-old's opinions on prehistoric creatures. "Should we go to the playground?" Ethan suggested. "Yes!" Oliver grabbed Harper's hand without hesitation, pulling her toward the swings. Come on, come on! I want to show you the big slide." Harper's face registered surprise at the sudden contact, then softened into something vulnerable and sweet. She looked back at Ethan over her shoulder, and he saw it, the fear and hope warring in her eyes, the wonder at being accepted so easily by a child who didn't know he was supposed to be afraid of her. They spent the next hour in the playground, Oliver dragging Harper from the swings to the slide to the climbing structure, narrating his adventures in a constant stream of commentary. Harper kept up admirably, helping him across the monkey bars, catching him at the bottom of the slide, pretending to be scared when he roared at her like a dinosaur. Ethan stood nearby, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to let them build their own connection. He watched Harper's careful way with his son, patient but not patronizing, engaged but not overwhelming. She was good with kids, he realized. Whatever fear she'd had about being around children, it didn't show. Then Oliver asked the question Ethan had been dreading. They were sitting on a bench, taking a water break, when Oliver reached out and touched Harper's arm, specifically the edge of her sleeve where it met her wrist. "What's under there?" he asked, his small fingers pressing against the fabric. Harper went very still. Ethan started to intervene, but she shook her head almost imperceptibly. She took a breath, and then she answered. "I got hurt a few years ago," she said, her voice calm and matter-of-fact. "A fire burned my arm, and now I have scars." Oliver considered this with the seriousness of a scientist evaluating new data. "Does it hurt?" "Not anymore. It hurt a lot when it happened, but now it's just how my skin looks." "Can I see?" Harper hesitated for just a moment. Then slowly she rolled back her sleeve. Ethan held his breath as Oliver studied Harper's scarred arm with undisguised curiosity. The twisted skin, the discoloration, the evidence of trauma that most adults would have looked away from. His son examined all of it with the neutral interest of a child who hadn't yet learned that some things were supposed to be hidden. "It looks like a dragon," Oliver finally declared. Harper blinked. "What?" "The bumpy parts." Oliver traced the air above her arm without touching. "They look like dragon scales. See? This part is the head, and that part is the tail." Ethan saw the moment Harper's composure cracked, not into tears, but into something raw, surprise maybe, or relief, or something even more fundamental than that. "I never thought of it that way," she said, her voice not quite steady. "Dragons are cool," Oliver informed her. "They can breathe fire and fly, and they're really strong, so maybe your arm is cool too." Harper's eyes met Ethan's over Oliver's head. He saw them glistening in the afternoon light. "Maybe it is," she whispered. Oliver, oblivious to the emotional weight of the moment, had already moved on. "Can we get ice cream now?" Ethan laughed, the sound breaking the tension. "Sure, buddy, we can get ice cream." They walked to a nearby cart, Oliver bouncing between them, still holding Harper's hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. Ethan bought 3 cones, vanilla for Oliver, chocolate for himself, strawberry for Harper, and they sat on a bench eating them while the afternoon sun warmed their faces. "Thank you," Harper said quietly, while Oliver was distracted by a pigeon. "For what?" "For letting me meet him. For trusting me with this." She gestured vaguely at the whole scene, the park, the playground, the small boy now chasing pigeons in circles. "This is your whole world, Ethan, and you just opened the door." "You earned the door." "Did I?" She looked at him, genuinely uncertain. "We've known each other less than 2 weeks. Time doesn't always matter. Sometimes you just know." "Know what?" Ethan watched his son stumble and catch himself, laughing at his own clumsiness, completely absorbed in the simple joy of being alive on a sunny afternoon. Then he looked at the woman beside him, this scarred, scared, beautiful woman who had walked into his life expecting rejection and found something else instead. "That someone's worth the risk," he said. Harper didn't respond, but her hand found his on the bench between them. They sat like that, connected, while Oliver played and the ice cream melted and the world carried on around them. It was such a small moment, such an ordinary afternoon, but Ethan knew, with a certainty that settled in his bones, that something important was happening, something that couldn't be undone. They were building something. He didn't know what it would become. He didn't know if it would last. But for the first time in years, he wanted to find out. And that wanting, that simple, terrifying, beautiful wanting, felt like the beginning of everything. The weeks that followed were a slow dance of discovery. Ethan and Harper settled into a rhythm that felt both new and familiar, like learning a song they'd both somehow always known. They saw each other 3 or 4 times a week when their schedules aligned, walks in the park, quiet dinners at one or the other's apartment, occasional outings that included Oliver. Oliver had accepted Harper with the easy grace of childhood. She was Daddy's friend Harper now, a fixture in their small world who brought him books about dinosaurs and always asked about his day. He showed her his favorite hiding spots in the apartment, introduced her to Mr. Trumpet, a high honor, Ethan explained, and declared that she was pretty good at playing pretend, which was essentially a 4-year-old's highest compliment. But it wasn't all smooth. There were moments when Ethan saw the walls go up in Harper's eyes, when another parent at the park stared a beat too long, when a stranger on the street did that particular flinch at the sight of her scars. She would go quiet then, folding into herself, and Ethan learned to give her space without giving too much, to stay close without crowding. She told him more about the fire, in pieces, about waking up in the hospital not knowing if she'd live, about the long months of recovery, the way her friends had drifted away one by one, unable to handle the version of her that had emerged from the flames, about the relationships that had ended as soon as she revealed herself, the men who'd said all the right things and then slowly, quietly disappeared. I used to keep track, she admitted one evening, sitting on Ethan's couch while Oliver slept down the hall. The number of people who left, like it was proof of something, evidence that I was right to expect the worst. What's the count? I stopped at 17. 17 people. 17 rejections. 17 times she had trusted someone with her truth and been abandoned for it. I'm not going to be 18, Ethan said. Harper smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. You say that now. I mean it now. And I'll mean it tomorrow. And the day after that. Words are easy, Ethan. Then I'll prove it with actions, as many as it takes. She leaned into him, her head finding the hollow of his shoulder like it belonged there. I want to believe you. Then believe me a little more every day. That's all I'm asking. She didn't respond, but her hand found his and held on tight. And Ethan understood that this was what love looked like when it had been through fire. Cautious, wounded, desperate to trust, but terrified of what trust had cost before. He would wait, however long it took. He would show her that some people stayed. Their first real fight came 6 weeks into whatever this was. It started small. Harper canceled their plans at the last minute, something about being too tired, and Ethan had swallowed his disappointment and said it was fine. But it happened again the next week, and again. 3 cancellations in a row, and when Ethan finally asked if something was wrong, Harper shut down completely. I just needed space, she said, her voice flat and distant on the phone. I'm allowed to need space. Of course you are, but you're also allowed to tell me what's going on. Nothing's going on. I'm just tired. Harper. What do you want me to say, Ethan? Her voice cracked, sharp edges showing through the composure. That I'm scared? That I woke up 3 nights ago from a nightmare about the fire and couldn't breathe for 10 minutes? That sometimes I look in the mirror and can't recognize myself and the only thing that helps is being alone? Ethan's heart clenched. Why didn't you tell me? Because it's not your job to fix me. I'm not trying to fix you. I'm trying to be here for you. There's a difference. Silence on the line, long enough that Ethan thought she might have hung up. Then softly, I don't know how to let you. I know, he said. I know you don't. But push me away too many times and I'll start to believe you mean it, and I don't think you do. What if I hurt you? What if I'm too broken to do this? Then we figure it out together. That's what partnership means. Another long silence. When Harper spoke again, her voice was thick with unshed tears. Can you come over? I don't want to be alone right now. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He called Tyler's sister, who had become his unofficial emergency babysitter over the past few weeks, and drove across town to Harper's apartment. She met him at the door in sweatpants and a baggy shirt, her hair tangled, her face bare and puffy from crying. She looked like a woman who had been fighting battles he couldn't see. Ethan didn't say anything. He just pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried, great, heaving sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep, somewhere she'd been keeping locked down for years. He held her until the tears stopped, until her breathing steadied, until she pulled back and looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be. I'm so scared, Ethan, all the time. I'm scared of wanting you. I'm scared of needing you. I'm scared that one day you'll wake up and realize I'm too much work and you'll leave like everyone else. I'm not everyone else. I know. But knowing and believing are different things." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away the remnants of her tears. "Then let me help you believe. Not by fixing you. You don't need to be fixed. Just by being here, consistently, every day, until your heart catches up with your head." Harper's lips trembled. "What if it takes a long time?" "Then it takes a long time." Ethan pressed his forehead to hers, breathing her in. "I'm not in any rush. I've got nowhere else to be." They stood like that for a long moment, two people learning to trust in the small space between heartbeats. Then Harper kissed him, really kissed him, for the first time, and it was nothing like the gentle forehead kiss he'd given her weeks ago. This was hungry and desperate and full of all the things neither of them knew how to say. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Stay," Harper said. "Not for anything. I'm not ready for anything. But just stay. Sleep here. Be here when I wake up." "Okay." They fell asleep on her couch, tangled together in an arrangement that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. And when Harper woke up screaming at 3 a.m., caught in the grip of a nightmare she couldn't shake, Ethan was there to hold her through it, to whisper that she was safe, that the fire was over, that he wasn't going anywhere. When she finally calmed down, her face pressed against his chest, she said the words he'd been waiting to hear. "I believe you." It wasn't everything. It wasn't a promise or a declaration. But it was a start, and starts were all they needed. The next morning, Ethan woke to pale sunlight filtering through Harper's curtains and the sound of her moving in the kitchen. He found her there, making coffee, her hair still tangled and her face soft with sleep. "Morning," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. "I wasn't sure if you'd still be here." "Where else would I be?" "I don't know. Home. Away. Regretting last night." Ethan crossed to her and took the coffee cup from her hand, setting it on the counter. Then he tilted her chin up until she had to look at him. "I don't regret a single second," he said. "Not the conversation, not the tears, not holding you while you slept. If anything, I'm grateful. You finally let me in." Harper's eyes searched his face, looking for the lie, the hesitation, the beginning of goodbye. Finding none, she let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for years. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "Be in a relationship. Let someone see me like this. I've been alone for so long, Ethan. Even when I was with other people, I was alone. Then we learned together. I'm not exactly an expert either. What if we mess it up? Then we mess it up and try again. That's how it works. That's how anything worth having works." Harper stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face, genuine and unguarded and so beautiful it made his chest ache. "You really believe that, don't you?" "I really do." "Okay." She took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for something. "Okay, then let's try. For real. Not just dates and careful conversations. Let's actually try to build something." "What did you have in mind?" "I don't know yet. Maybe we figure it out as we go." Her smile turned wry. "Fair warning, though, I'm probably going to freak out again, multiple times, and push you away, and convince myself you're going to leave. And I'm probably going to be exhausted and distracted and have to cancel plans because Oliver needs me, and forget important things, and not always say the right thing. So we'll be a mess." "A beautiful mess," Ethan corrected. "The best kind." Harper laughed, and the sound was like sunlight breaking through clouds. She rose on her toes and kissed him, soft and sweet. "Coffee's getting cold," she murmured against his lips. "Let it." And for a while, they did. The months that followed were neither fairy tale nor disaster. They were something more complicated and more real. The slow, patient work of two people learning to fit their broken pieces together without cutting each other on the sharp edges. Ethan and Harper fell into a routine that felt organic rather than forced. Tuesday evenings became their standing date night when Oliver was with Miss Diane for her monthly pajama party, sleepover. Sunday afternoons were family time, the three of them exploring Portland's parks and museums and quirky shops, Oliver chattering between them like a small tour guide who had opinions about everything. And scattered throughout were the stolen moments, a quick lunch when their schedules aligned, late-night phone calls when sleep wouldn't come, text messages that said nothing important and meant everything. Harper started staying over on weekends, sleeping in Ethan's bed while Oliver slumbered down the hall. They hadn't crossed the final physical threshold yet. Harper wasn't ready, and Ethan wasn't pushing, but there was an intimacy in simply sharing space, in waking up to find her beside him, in watching her make breakfast in his kitchen, her hair loose and her feet bare, looking for all the world like she belonged there. Oliver had stopped asking if Harper was Daddy's friend. Now he just called her Harper, like she was a fixture, a fact, something permanent rather than temporary. "Harper, look at my drawing." "Harper, can you help me with my shoes?" "Harper, will you read me the dinosaur book again?" And Harper, who had spent 4 years avoiding children because she feared their reactions to her scars, found herself being pulled into Oliver's orbit with increasing frequency. She read him bedtime stories. She helped him with puzzles. She learned the names of all his toy dinosaurs and the complicated social dynamics of his imaginary world. "He asked me to tuck him in last night," she told Ethan one evening, her voice wondering. "When you were in the shower, he asked me to tuck him in, and when I did, he grabbed my arm, my scarred arm, and used it like a pillow. That doesn't surprise me." It surprised me. He just held it, like it was the most normal thing in the world, like there was nothing wrong with it. Because to him, there isn't. Harper's eyes glistened. "I don't know how to explain what that feels like, to be touched without someone flinching first, to be accepted without having to earn it." Ethan pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "That's what kids do. They love unconditionally until someone teaches them not to. Then Oliver hasn't been taught yet. And I intend to keep it that way." But even as their small family unit grew stronger, life continued to throw obstacles in their path. Ethan's work remained demanding. A bad wiring job on a commercial property had him working 60-hour weeks to make the deadline. Harper's patient load increased when another therapist at her clinic went on maternity leave. There were days when they barely saw each other, when exhaustion won out over connection, when the weight of their separate responsibilities threatened to pull them apart. And then there was Sophie. Oliver's mother called on a Thursday afternoon out of the blue while Ethan was in the middle of running wire through a particularly cramped crawl space. He let it go to voicemail, assuming it was about the upcoming custody weekend. But when he listened to the message later, his blood went cold. "Ethan, it's me. I need to talk to you about Oliver, about custody. Call me back, it's important." He waited until he was home, until Oliver was settled in front of a cartoon, before returning the call. Sophie answered on the second ring. "Ethan, thanks for calling back." "What's going on, Sophie? Your message sounded serious." A pause. Then, "I want more time with Oliver." The words hit like a physical blow. "What?" "I know what you're thinking, but things have changed. Derek and I are stable now. We're engaged. We're buying a house in Seattle." Her voice was calm, practiced, like she'd rehearsed this conversation. "And I've been going to therapy, working on myself. I'm ready to be more present in Oliver's life." Ethan's grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles went white. "You see him 1 weekend a month, Sophie. 1 weekend. And half the time you cancel." "I know, and I'm sorry for that. But that's what I'm trying to fix." "By demanding more custody?" "By asking for it. There's a difference." Her tone sharpened slightly. "He's my son too, Ethan. I have rights. Rights you gave up, voluntarily. Rights I was too broken to exercise. But I'm not that person anymore. I've done the work. I've gotten healthy, and I want to be part of my son's life. Ethan pressed his free hand against his forehead, trying to steady his breathing. Part of him, the part that remembered the woman he'd married, the woman he'd loved, the woman who had looked at their newborn son with terror in her eyes, understood what she was saying. People could change. People could heal. She deserved a chance to make amends. But another part of him, the part that had held Oliver through nightmares about Mommy not coming back, the part that had explained over and over why they lived in one house and Mommy lived in another, couldn't let go of the anger that easily. What exactly are you asking for? Joint custody, week on, week off, or at least every other weekend with some weekdays. He has school, he has stability, he has a life here, Sophie. And he could have a life in Seattle, too. We could work out a schedule. No. The word came out harder than he intended, but he didn't take it back. Ethan, no. You don't get to disappear for 3 years and then waltz back in demanding half his time. That's not how this works. Then how does it work? Because I'm trying, Ethan. I'm really trying. Try harder. Show up for the time you already have. Stop canceling. Be consistent. Prove that you're actually committed before you ask for more. Silence stretched between them. When Sophie spoke again, her voice was thick with barely contained emotion. I was sick, Ethan. Postpartum depression. I didn't know how to ask for help, and by the time I figured it out, I'd already destroyed everything. I know I can't undo that, but I can do better now. I want to do better. Then do better. With the schedule we have. 1 weekend a month. Show up. Be present. Let Oliver learn to trust you again before you uproot his entire life. And if I want to take this to court? Ethan's stomach dropped, but he kept his voice steady. Then we'll deal with that if it happens. But Sophie, if you drag him through a custody battle, if you make him feel like a prize to be won instead of a kid to be loved, I will fight you with everything I have. Another long pause, then quietly, I'm not the enemy, Ethan. I never said you were. But you're not the hero either. Not yet. Prove me wrong. Please, for Oliver's sake, prove me wrong. He hung up before she could respond, then stood in his kitchen with his heart pounding and his hands shaking. Oliver's cartoon played in the background, oblivious laughter at some animated pratfall, while Ethan tried to remember how to breathe. Harper found him like that when she let herself in with the key he'd given her 2 weeks ago. She took one look at his face and crossed to him immediately. What happened? Sophie called. He told her everything, the custody request, the Seattle house, the veiled threat of court. Harper listened without interrupting, her hand warm and steady on his arm. What are you going to do? She asked when he finished. I don't know. Fight her, I guess, if it comes to that. But I don't want Oliver caught in the middle. He's already in the middle. He has been since she left. I know. But there's a difference between navigating a difficult situation and being weaponized in one. Ethan ran both hands through his hair, frustration leaking through his careful composure. What kind of mother shows up after 3 years and demands equal time? Like she hasn't missed every fever, every nightmare, every first day of school. A mother who's trying to make amends, maybe. Harper's voice was gentle but firm. I'm not defending her. What she did was wrong. But people can change, Ethan. People can heal and grow and become better versions of themselves. Isn't that what we've been doing? Ethan looked at her sharply. That's different. Is it? You were closed off and disappearing when I met you. I was convinced I'd never be loved. We both had to fight our way back from something. Is it impossible that Sophie is doing the same thing? She hurt him, Harper. She hurt our son. I know. And that's unforgivable in a lot of ways, but not in all of them. Harper squeezed his arm gently. I'm not saying give her what she's asking for. I'm saying consider the possibility that she's not entirely wrong to ask. Ethan wanted to argue. He wanted to hold on to his anger, because anger was easier than fear, and right now he was terrified. Terrified of losing Oliver, even partially. Terrified of disrupting the stability they'd built. Terrified that Sophie would swoop in and undo all the careful work of the past 3 years. But Harper's words lodged somewhere beneath his ribs, refusing to dislodge. People could change. He knew that better than most. The question was whether Sophie had actually changed, or whether this was just another phase that would fade as soon as the novelty wore off. I need to think about this, he said finally. Then think about it. But don't make any decisions from anger. Oliver deserves better than that. When did you get so wise? Harper's smile was sad. I've had a lot of time to think about regret, about the things people do and don't do, and how hard it is to come back from both. Oliver chose that moment to appear in the kitchen doorway, clutching Mr. Trumpet and looking curious. Why are you hugging? He asked. Because sometimes grown-ups need hugs, Ethan said, releasing Harper and crouching to his son's level. What do you need, little man? I'm hungry. Can Harper make the dinosaur chicken nuggets? She makes them better than you. Harper laughed, the tension breaking. I absolutely can make dinosaur nuggets. Do you want to help me? Yes. I want to pick which dinosaurs go first. As Harper followed Oliver to the freezer discussing the merits of eating T-Rex versus Brontosaurus, Ethan allowed himself a moment of gratitude for this woman who had walked into his life and made it bigger, for his son who found joy in the smallest things, for the family they were building, imperfect and complicated and real. Whatever happened with Sophie, he wouldn't face it alone. The weeks that followed were tense with anticipation. Sophie didn't follow through on her threat to take things to court, not yet, but she did start showing up more consistently for her scheduled weekends. 3 months in a row without canceling, a personal record that Ethan noted with cautious optimism. Oliver came back from those weekends with stories about Sophie's new house, about Derek who was okay but talks too much about cars, about the dog they were thinking of getting. He seemed happy enough, though Ethan watched carefully for signs of stress or confusion. Mommy asked me if I want to live with her sometimes, Oliver mentioned casually one Sunday evening while Ethan was giving him a bath. Ethan's heart stopped. What did you tell her? I said I like living with you, but maybe I could visit more. She has a backyard. Would you like that? Visiting more? Oliver considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice weighing constitutional precedent. Maybe, but not too much. I'd miss you and Harper and Miss Diane and my room. You'd miss your room? It has all my dinosaurs in it. This was apparently the deciding factor. I told Mommy I can't move my dinosaurs. They're happy here. Ethan fought the urge to laugh and cry simultaneously. Your dinosaurs are very happy here. I know. I take good care of them. When Oliver was in bed, Ethan relayed the conversation to Harper, who had been reading in the living room. She set down her book and listened with the focused attention she brought to everything. It sounds like he's processing it in a healthy way, she said when he finished. He knows where his home is. That's important. But he's also open to more time with Sophie. That's unexpected. Is it? She's his mother. Part of him is always going to want that connection, no matter how complicated it is. Ethan sank onto the couch beside her. I know. It just feels like I'm being asked to share him with someone who didn't earn it. Maybe that's not your call to make. What do you mean? Harper tucked her feet beneath her, turning to face him fully. Oliver gets to decide what kind of relationship he wants with his mother. Not you, not Sophie. Him. And as he gets older, that's going to become more and more true. Your job isn't to protect him from her. It's to protect him while he figures out how she fits into his life. When did parenting get so complicated? I think it always was. You just didn't notice until now. Ethan leaned his head back against the couch cushion, staring at the ceiling. I'm scared, Harper. I'm scared that she'll hurt him again, that she'll promise things she can't deliver and he'll be crushed, that I'll watch him go through everything I went through when she left, except worse because he's old enough now to understand it. Those are valid fears. Harper's hand found his, but you can't protect him from everything, and trying to will only push him away eventually. So what do I do? You love him. You create a stable foundation for him to stand on, and you let him make his own discoveries about who his mother is while being there to catch him if he falls. That sounds terrifying. That sounds like parenthood. Ethan turned his head to look at her, this woman who had somehow become essential to his life without him noticing. How do you always know the right thing to say? I don't. I just know what it feels like to have people make decisions about my life without asking me. And I don't want that for Oliver. He thought about her scars then, about the way the world had treated her since the fire, about the people who had decided she was too damaged, too different, too much, without ever giving her the chance to show them who she really was. I love you, Ethan said. The words came out before he could stop them, hanging in the air between them like something fragile and precious. He hadn't planned to say it, hadn't even consciously realized he felt it, though of course he did. Had for weeks now, maybe longer. Harper's eyes went wide. Her hand tightened in his. Ethan, you don't have to say it back. I'm not expecting anything. I needed you to know. She stopped, swallowed, tried again. I don't know if I know how to love someone anymore. It's been so long, and I've been so scared. I know. But I think, her voice cracked slightly. I think I'm learning. With you. I think I'm remembering. It wasn't the same as saying it back, but it was something, maybe something better, because it was honest. Ethan lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. You keep saying that. Because I keep meaning it. Harper's smile was tremulous but real. She leaned into him, her head finding its familiar spot on his shoulder, and they sat together in the quiet of the evening while the world carried on outside. I'm scared too, you know, she said after a while. Of what? Of everything. Of this. Of losing this. She gestured vaguely at the apartment around them, the toys scattered on the floor, the drawings stuck to the refrigerator, the small sneakers by the door. Of getting used to having a family again and then watching it fall apart. What makes you think it would fall apart? History, experience, the general tendency of good things to end. Ethan turned this over in his mind. He understood her fear because he shared it. They had both been abandoned before, her by friends and lovers who couldn't handle her scars, him by a wife who couldn't handle motherhood. Trust came hard when trust had been broken so many times. Maybe this time is different, he said finally. What makes you say that? Because this time, we both know how bad it can get. We're not naive. We're not pretending everything will be perfect. We're going in with our eyes open and our guards up, and we're choosing to try anyway. He paused, searching for the right words. That has to count for something. Harper was quiet for a long moment. Then she lifted her head and looked at him, her eyes dark and serious. I love you too, she said. Ethan's heart stopped. What? I love you. I've been terrified to say it because saying it makes it real, and real things can hurt you. But you said it first, and you didn't run away. And I'm so tired of being scared all the time. Her voice broke slightly. So I love you. I love Oliver. I love this weird little family we're building, and I'm going to try very hard not to ruin it. You couldn't ruin it if you tried. Don't tempt me. I'm very talented at self-sabotage. Ethan laughed, the sound catching in his throat somewhere between joy and relief. Then we'll sabotage each other and call it even. Harper kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. And when they finally pulled apart, both of them were crying, though neither of them acknowledged it out loud. So what happens now? Harper asked, echoing the question she'd asked all those weeks ago in the park. Now we figure it out, one day at a time, together. That sounds manageable. It will be, as long as we keep showing up. Harper tucked herself back against his side, her scarred arm resting across his chest, where he could feel it through his shirt. And Ethan held her there, this woman he loved, and let himself believe, really believe, that maybe they were going to be okay. The peace didn't last, of course. Peace never does. But for that night, in that moment, it was enough. 3 days later, Harper collapsed at work. Ethan got the call while he was pulling wire through a junction box, Marcus holding the other end of the line. His phone buzzed in his pocket, an unfamiliar number, and he almost let it go to voicemail. But something made him answer. Is this Ethan Cole? Yes. Who's this? This is Oregon Health and Science University Hospital. Your contact information was listed as the emergency contact for a patient named Harper Lane. She's been admitted. The rest of the words blurred together. Collapsed, dehydration, exhaustion, stress, stable but being held for observation. Ethan was in his truck before he finished the call, shouting something to Marcus about a family emergency as he peeled out of the job site. The drive to the hospital was a blur of red lights and wrong turns and hands that wouldn't stop shaking on the steering wheel. Emergency contact. She had listed him as her emergency contact. When had she done that? Why hadn't she told him? He found her in a room on the fourth floor, hooked up to an IV and looking smaller than he'd ever seen her. Her face was pale against the white pillow, shadows under her eyes that he hadn't noticed before. Or maybe he had noticed and just hadn't wanted to see. "Hey," she said weakly when he burst through the door. "Hey." Ethan crossed to her bedside in 2 steps, taking her hand. "You're in a hospital bed and all you can say is hey?" "I didn't want to worry you." "Too late. What happened?" Harper's eyes slid away from his. "I pushed too hard. Took on too many patients when we were short-staffed. Stopped sleeping. Stopped eating properly." She shrugged, the motion small and defeated. "My body decided to stage a revolt." "How long has this been going on?" "A few weeks, maybe a month." "A month." Ethan sank into the chair beside her bed, still holding her hand. "Harper, why didn't you tell me?" "Because you had enough on your plate. The Sophie situation. Work. Oliver. I didn't want to add to your stress." "So instead you ran yourself into the ground?" "I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I thought I could handle it." Her voice cracked. "I've always been able to handle it before." "Before you were alone. You had no one to lean on, but you're not alone anymore." Ethan brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "You have me. You have to let me help." "I don't know how to do that." "Then learn, because I can't." He stopped, his throat tight. "Can't lose you, Harper. Not now. Not after everything." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought I was protecting you, and instead I just—" "Shh." Ethan moved to sit on the edge of the bed, carefully avoiding the IV line, and gathered her into his arms. "We'll figure it out. We always do." Harper cried against his chest, weeks of stress and exhaustion and hidden struggle finally breaking through. And Ethan held her, this woman who had shown him her scars and then built new walls anyway, and made a silent vow to help her tear them down. The hospital kept her overnight for observation. Ethan stayed until visiting hours ended, then went home to relieve Tyler's sister and explain to Oliver why Harper wasn't there for dinner. "Is she sick?" Oliver asked, his small face worried. "A little bit, buddy, but she's going to be okay. The doctors are taking good care of her." "Can we bring her flowers? Mommy used to bring me flowers when I was sick." The mention of Sophie stung slightly, but Ethan pushed past it. "That's a great idea. We'll pick some out tomorrow." Oliver nodded solemnly. "Purple ones. Harper likes purple." "How do you know that?" "She told me. Her favorite color is purple because it's the color of healing. She said that when she was in the hospital for her arm, she thought about purple, and it made her feel better." Ethan stared at his son, marveling at the things children absorbed without trying. Harper had shared something personal with Oliver, something she'd never mentioned to Ethan, and his son had held on to it like treasure. "Purple it is," he said. The next morning, Ethan and Oliver arrived at the hospital with a bouquet of purple flowers, mostly irises and lavender, with some African violets the florist had thrown in for free when Oliver explained they were for Daddy's girlfriend who fell down at work. Harper was sitting up in bed when they walked in, looking better than she had the day before. Color had returned to her cheeks, and while she was still hooked to an IV, her smile when she saw them was genuine. "You brought me flowers," she said, her voice wondering. "Oliver picked them out." Ethan set the vase on the bedside table, while Oliver scrambled onto the foot of her bed with complete disregard for hospital protocol. "They're purple," Oliver announced, "because purple means healing. You told me." Harper's eyes glistened. "I did tell you that. I can't believe you remembered." "I remember everything about you." This was stated with the unshakable confidence of a 4-year-old who had never experienced the limitations of memory. Like how you're allergic to cats and your favorite ice cream is mint chocolate chip, and you sleep with the closet light on because you don't like total dark. "Oliver," Ethan started, but Harper held up a hand. "It's okay. He's right about all of it." She reached out and ruffled Oliver's hair. "You're very observant." "What's observant?" "It means you pay attention." "Oh yeah, I'm good at that." Oliver settled himself cross-legged on the bed, clearly planning to stay. "When are you coming home?" The word home hit Ethan in the chest. Oliver had called Ethan's apartment home in relation to Harper, like it was already a shared space, a place she belonged. Harper glanced at Ethan, and he saw the same realization in her eyes. The doctor says I can leave this afternoon, as long as I promise to take it easy for a while. What's a while? A week or two, maybe more. That's okay. Daddy and I can take care of you, right, Daddy? Right, buddy. Harper looked between them, the small boy who had accepted her without question and the man who had stayed when everyone else left. And for the first time since Ethan had known her, she seemed completely at peace. Okay, she said softly. Let's go home. The first few days after Harper came home from the hospital were a delicate dance of recovery and rediscovery. Ethan had insisted she stay at his apartment rather than going back to her own place, and she had agreed with less resistance than he expected, a sign of how depleted she truly was. He set her up on the couch with pillows and blankets, a stack of books she'd been meaning to read, and strict instructions to do absolutely nothing productive. Oliver appointed himself her official caretaker, bringing her cups of water she didn't ask for and covering her with his own small blanket when he decided she looked cold. You're supposed to rest, Oliver informed her solemnly on the second day when Harper tried to get up and help with dinner. Daddy said so, and the doctor said so, and I said so. 3 against 1, Harper conceded, sinking back onto the cushions. I'm outnumbered. You have to drink your water too, all of it. Yes, sir. Oliver beamed at her compliance and scurried off to the kitchen, where Ethan was attempting to make something more nutritious than their usual rotation of frozen dinners and takeout. He'd looked up recipes online, actual recipes, with vegetables and protein and things that required more than a microwave, and was determined to feed Harper back to health even if it killed him. The pasta came out slightly overcooked and the sauce was from a jar, but Harper ate every bite like it was gourmet cuisine. And when Oliver proudly presented the dessert he'd made himself, a bowl of grapes arranged to look like a smiley face, she proclaimed it the best dessert she'd ever had. You're good at this, Ethan told her later, after Oliver was in bed and the apartment had settled into its nighttime quiet. Being taken care of, I expected more fighting. Harper was curled in the corner of the couch, wrapped in a blanket, looking more rested than she had in weeks. I'm too tired to fight. And honestly, she paused, something vulnerable flickering across her face. It feels nice, being taken care of. I don't remember the last time someone did that for me. What about after the fire? That was different. That was medical professionals doing their jobs. This is... She gestured vaguely at the apartment around her, the toys scattered on the floor, the dinner dishes drying in the rack, the small shoes lined up by the door. This is family. This is people who want me here, not people who are paid to keep me alive. Ethan moved to sit beside her, pulling her gently against his side. We want you here, Oliver and I. You're not an obligation, Harper. You're a choice, our choice. She was quiet for a long moment, her head resting on his shoulder. When she spoke again, her voice was thick. I don't know what I did to deserve this. You showed up. You kept showing up, even when you were scared. That's all it takes. It shouldn't be that simple. But it is. Ethan pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Everything complicated about love, all the grand gestures and dramatic declarations, that's just noise. The real thing is simple. It's showing up, every day, even when it's hard. Harper lifted her head to look at him, her eyes searching his face. When did you become so wise? I've had a good teacher. Small, loud, obsessed with dinosaurs. She laughed, the sound soft but genuine. Oliver does have a way of cutting through the nonsense. Kids usually do. They haven't learned all the complicated ways adults have of making things harder than they need to be. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. Outside, rain began to tap against the windows, Portland's eternal soundtrack, and Ethan found himself thinking about how different this moment felt from all the nights he'd sat on this same couch alone. The silence used to feel like absence, like something missing. Now it felt like presence, like completeness. I need to tell you something, Harper said suddenly. Ethan's stomach tightened slightly. Okay. When I was in the hospital, while you were there actually, but you'd stepped out to take a call, one of the nurses came in to check my vitals. Young woman, maybe mid-20s, and she saw my arm. Your scars. Yeah. Harper's voice was steady, but Ethan could feel tension in her body. She didn't flinch or look away. She just asked me what happened. And I told her about the fire, the surgeries, all of it. And do you know what she said? What? She said, "You must be really strong to have survived that." And then she showed me her own scar, a surgical one, on her abdomen, from an accident when she was a teenager. And she told me that she became a nurse because of what happened to her, because the nurses who took care of her made her want to help others the same way. Ethan wasn't sure where this was going, but he stayed quiet, letting Harper find her way to the point. "I've spent 4 years hiding," Harper continued. "Hiding my scars, hiding my story, hiding myself. Because I thought that's what I had to do to survive in a world that judges people for being different. But that nurse, she wasn't hiding. She was using her experience to connect with people, to help them feel less alone. And you want to do the same thing?" Harper turned to face him fully, something new burning in her eyes. "There's a burn survivor support group that meets at the hospital. I found out about it years ago, but never had the courage to go. I was too scared of being seen, of being part of a group that defined itself by trauma." She took a breath. "But I think I want to try now. I think I'm ready." Ethan felt his heart swell with something that was part pride and part relief. "Harper, that's huge. It's terrifying. All the important things are." She smiled, but it was shaky around the edges. "Will you come with me, the first time at least? I know it's a lot to ask. I'll be there. Whatever you need. You can't come inside, it's for survivors only, but maybe you could wait in the car or in the lobby. Just knowing you're nearby would help. I'll wait wherever you need me to wait, for however long it takes." Harper's eyes filled with tears. The good kind. The kind that came from being overwhelmed by something positive rather than negative. "I don't know how I got so lucky." "It's not luck. It's choice. You chose to give me a chance that day in the coffee shop. You chose to show me your scars instead of hiding. You chose to let me in even though every instinct was telling you to run. And you chose to stay." "I chose to stay," Ethan confirmed. "And I'll keep choosing. Every day. For as long as you'll let me." Harper kissed him then. A real kiss. Deep and certain and full of all the things words couldn't capture. And when they finally pulled apart, both of them slightly breathless, Ethan saw something in her face that had been missing before. Hope. Unguarded, uncomplicated hope. It was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. The Burn Survivor Support Group met on Tuesday evenings in a conference room at OHSU. Harper spent the entire drive there practically vibrating with anxiety, her hands twisting in her lap, her knee bouncing with nervous energy. "You don't have to do this tonight," Ethan said, pulling into the hospital parking lot. "We can go home. Try again next week." "No." Harper's voice was firm despite her obvious fear. "If I don't do it now, I'll talk myself out of it. I'll find a reason to wait. And then another reason. And before I know it, another 4 years will have passed. Then I'll be right here, in this exact parking spot, for however long it takes." Harper leaned across the center console and kissed him quickly. "Thank you. For everything. Go, be brave. I'll be here when you come out." He watched her walk toward the hospital entrance, her stride determined even if her shoulders were tense. She paused at the door, turning back to look at him one last time. He raised his hand in a small wave, and she nodded, a silent acknowledgement, before disappearing inside. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. Ethan spent the time responding to work emails, texting Tyler updates on Harper's progress, and trying not to watch the clock too obsessively. When Harper finally emerged from the building, her face was tear-stained, but her eyes were shining. "How was it?" he asked as she slid into the passenger seat. "Incredible." Her voice was thick with emotion. "Ethan, there were so many people, all ages, all backgrounds, all different stories, and they understood. They actually understood, not just intellectually, but in their bones. They've lived it. That must have felt good. It felt like coming home to a place I didn't know existed." Harper wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "There was a woman there, Maria, who's been a survivor for 15 years. She has scars all over her face, and she walks into that room like she owns it. No shame, no hiding, just confidence. And I thought, that's who I want to be. That's the version of myself I want to grow into. You're already growing into her. Not yet, but maybe someday. She turned to look at him, her expression soft. Thank you for waiting. I told you I would. I know, but saying it and doing it are different things. You did it. Ethan reached over and took her hand. I'll always do it. That's what showing up means. They drove home through the Portland rain, and Harper talked the whole way. About the other survivors she'd met, about the facilitator who'd made her feel welcome, about the shared understanding that had passed between people who had all walked through fire in one way or another. She was more animated than Ethan had ever seen her, her walls down, her defenses lowered, her true self shining through. This, he realized, was who Harper was supposed to be. Not the guarded woman he'd met in that coffee shop, bracing for rejection, but this, open, hopeful, connected. This was the Harper who had existed before the fire, and the Harper who was finally emerging from its shadow. He was grateful beyond words to be here to see it. The support group became a regular part of Harper's life. She went every Tuesday without fail, even when work was exhausting, even when her anxiety tried to talk her out of it. Some weeks were harder than others. She came home quiet sometimes, processing things she'd heard, working through feelings she'd buried, but the overall trajectory was upward. She was healing in ways that went beyond the physical, and Ethan watched it happen with a mixture of awe and gratitude. She started making changes in other areas too. She began wearing short sleeves around the apartment, no longer automatically reaching for cardigans and long-sleeve shirts to hide her scars. She let Oliver see her arm without flinching when he reached for it, without the instinctive need to explain or apologize. She started talking about her experience more openly, with Ethan, with Tyler, even with casual acquaintances who noticed and asked questions. And she started painting again. Ethan discovered this on a Saturday afternoon when he went to Harper's apartment to help her pack up some things she wanted to bring to his place. She'd been spending most of her time there anyway, and they'd started talking about making it more official, not moving in together exactly, but something close. A drawer for her clothes, a shelf for her books, a key that was hers to keep rather than borrowed. There's something I want to show you, Harper said, leading him down the hallway to a door he'd never seen open before. Is this where you keep the bodies? Very funny. She hesitated, her hand on the doorknob. I've never shown this to anyone, not since the fire. I've barely gone in here myself. You don't have to. I want to. She took a breath and pushed the door open. The room was small, probably intended as a home office or nursery, but every inch of wall space was covered in paintings. Canvases of all sizes, some framed and some bare, overlapping and crowding each other in a riot of color and emotion. Abstract swirls of red and orange that suggested fire, calm blues and greens that felt like water, like peace. Portraits that were almost but not quite human, faces emerging from shadows and light. And everywhere woven through the images like a recurring theme, there were scars. Painted scars on painted skin, transformed into something beautiful, something intentional, something that told a story. Ethan stood in the doorway, overwhelmed. I started after I got out of the hospital, Harper said quietly, standing beside him. When I couldn't stand to look in the mirror, I started painting what I saw, and then what I felt, and then what I wanted to become. She gestured at the room. This is 4 years of therapy, my real therapy, the kind that happened when no one was watching. Harper, these are incredible. They're private, or they were. I never thought I'd show them to anyone. Then why are you showing me? She turned to face him, and there were tears in her eyes, but also something else, something fierce and certain. Because I love you, she said, and loving someone means letting them see all of you, not just the polished parts, not just the version you show the world, all of it, the dark corners, the hidden rooms, the things you're afraid of. Ethan stepped into the room, moving slowly between the canvases, taking in each image. He saw Harper's journey in these paintings, the rage and grief and despair of the early works, gradually giving way to something softer, more hopeful, more at peace. You should show these to other people, he said. What? Your support group, or maybe a gallery. Harper, these are art. Real art. The kind that makes people feel something. They're just my feelings on canvas. That's what all art is. Ethan turned back to her, taking both her hands in his. You've been hiding so much of yourself for so long. Your scars, your story, your talent. But you don't have to hide anymore. Not from me. Not from the world. Harper's lip trembled. What if people don't understand? Some won't, but some will. And the ones who do, those are your people. Those are the ones worth keeping. She stared at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression, and then she laughed, a sound that was half sob and half joy. How do you always know exactly what to say? I don't. I just say what I'm thinking and hope for the best. Well, your thinking is pretty good. It's improved a lot since I met you. They stood in the middle of Harper's secret room, surrounded by paintings that told the story of her survival, and Ethan understood something fundamental about the woman he loved. She wasn't just healing from the fire. She was transforming, taking the worst thing that had ever happened to her and turning it into something beautiful. That was the most courageous thing he'd ever witnessed. I love you, he said, because it bore repeating, because some things needed to be said over and over until they became as natural as breathing. I love you too. Harper squeezed his hands. And I think I'm ready. Ready for what? To stop hiding, all of it, to let people see who I really am. Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. Then let's do it together. The weeks that followed were a kind of revolution. Harper started wearing short sleeves in public. Not always, but sometimes. She brought her paintings to the support group where they were received with tears and recognition and praise. Maria, the 15-year veteran, asked if Harper would consider displaying some pieces at a burn survivor awareness event the hospital was hosting. I don't know, Harper said when she told Ethan about the offer. That feels like a lot. It is a lot, but you've handled a lot. What if people don't get it? What if they think I'm just wallowing, exploiting my trauma? What if they do get it? What if your art helps someone else feel less alone? Harper chewed her lip, clearly torn. You really think I should do it? I think you should do whatever feels right. But I also think you have a gift, and gifts are meant to be shared. She thought about it for 3 days. On the 4th day, she called Maria and said yes. The awareness event was held on a Saturday in late October in the hospital's community center. Harper's paintings were displayed along one wall, each one accompanied by a small card explaining the piece and the artist's journey. She'd chosen 10 works, a curated selection that moved from darkness to light, from despair to hope. Ethan came with Oliver, who had demanded to see Harper's picture place and wouldn't take no for an answer. They arrived early, while Harper was still arranging the final details, her hands shaking slightly as she straightened frames. Daddy, look! Oliver pointed at one of the paintings, an abstract piece featuring a small figure emerging from what looked like flames, reaching toward a bright sky. That's Harper coming out of the fire. Harper turned, startled. You can tell what it is? Uh-huh. That's you. You were stuck in the fire, but then you climbed out, and now you're going to the sky. Oliver said this with the absolute certainty of a child who had never learned to doubt his own interpretations. It's a happy picture. Harper's eyes filled with tears. Yeah, buddy. It is a happy picture. The event drew a larger crowd than expected. Survivors and their families, hospital staff, community members who'd seen the flyers and come to learn. They moved through the space slowly, pausing at each painting, reading the cards, sometimes crying, sometimes hugging the artists. Ethan watched Harper from across the room as she talked to visitors, explaining her work, answering questions. She was nervous. He could see it in the way she held herself, the slightly too quick rhythm of her speech. But she was also radiant, alive in a way he'd never seen her. A woman approached her, clutching a tissue, tears streaming down her face. Ethan was too far away to hear what was said, but he saw Harper's expression shift from surprise to recognition to compassion. Saw her reach out and take the woman's hand. Saw them embrace like old friends, though he was certain they'd never met. Later, after the event wound down and the crowd dispersed, Harper told him about the woman. Her daughter was in a fire 2 years ago. She's only 8. Her scars are worse than mine. Harper's voice was thick with emotion. She said my paintings made her feel hope for the first time since the accident. She said if I could create something beautiful from something terrible, maybe her daughter could too. That's exactly what I told you would happen. I know, I didn't believe you. And now? Harper looked around at her paintings, at the empty chairs where people had sat and listened and felt, at the cards that visitors had left with words of encouragement and gratitude. Now I believe you, she said, about all of it. That night, after Oliver was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Harper showed Ethan the newest painting she'd been working on. It was smaller than the others, more intimate, and it took him a moment to understand what he was seeing. 3 figures. A tall man, a small child, and a woman with marks on her arm that could have been scars or could have been dragon scales, depending on how you looked. "It's us," he said. "It's us." Harper set the painting on the coffee table, her expression vulnerable. "I started it after that day at the park, when Oliver said my scars looked like a dragon, and I've been working on it ever since, adding details, making adjustments, and tonight it finally felt finished." Ethan studied the image, the way the 3 figures leaned into each other, the warmth in their painted faces, the sense of connection that radiated from the canvas. "This is how you see us. This is what we are, what we've become." Harper's voice was barely a whisper. A family. Ethan looked at her. This woman who had walked through fire and emerged transformed, who had showed him her scars and trusted him to stay, who had given him and Oliver a kind of love he'd stopped believing was possible. A family, he agreed, and in that moment, he knew what he had to do. The ring had belonged to his grandmother, a simple band with a small diamond, nothing flashy, but beautiful in its understatement. He'd had it for years, tucked away in a drawer, thinking he'd never have reason to give it to anyone, but now he did. The plan came together slowly, formed between work calls and bedtime routines and the ordinary chaos of daily life. He wanted it to be special, meaningful, something that captured everything their relationship had been and everything it could become. He settled on Bloom Coffee House, the place where they'd first met, the place where Harper had shown him her scars, and he'd chosen to stay. It felt right somehow, a circle completing itself. Tyler helped with the logistics, reserving a corner of the coffee shop, arranging for flowers, making sure Oliver would be occupied elsewhere so Ethan and Harper could have this moment to themselves. "You're actually doing it," Tyler said when Ethan showed him the ring. "You're actually proposing to her. Unless she says no." "She's not going to say no." "You don't know that." "I do know that. I've seen the way she looks at you, man, like you're the answer to a question she's been asking her whole life." Ethan tucked the ring back into his pocket, his heart already racing. "What if it's too soon? We've only been together for long enough," Tyler clapped him on the shoulder. "Stop overthinking it. You love her. She loves you. Oliver loves her. The only thing missing is the ring on her finger. And you're sure you can keep Oliver occupied? Jenny and I have a whole afternoon planned. Dinosaur museum, ice cream, maybe a movie if he's still got energy. That kid is not going to give you any trouble." The day arrived bright and cold, a rare sunny winter day in Portland, the kind that made everything look sharp and clean. Ethan dropped Oliver off with Tyler's sister, explaining that Daddy had an important errand to run. "What kind of errand?" Oliver asked suspiciously. "The grown-up kind." "Is it about Harper?" Ethan hesitated. "Maybe." Oliver's face split into a grin. "Are you going to ask her to marry you?" "What? How do you—" "Miss Diane's daughter got engaged. She said her boyfriend asked her to marry him, and then she got a ring, and then they had a party." Oliver bounced on his toes with excitement. "Are you going to give Harper a ring? Can I come to the party?" Ethan laughed, shaking his head in disbelief. "You're too smart for your own good, you know that?" "I know, so is it true?" "It might be true. But it's a secret, okay? You can't tell anyone." "I won't tell anyone." Oliver crossed his heart solemnly. "I'm really good at secrets." "I know you are, buddy. I hope she says yes." Oliver's expression turned serious. "I really like Harper. She makes you smile." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "Yeah? I smile more now?" You smile all the time now. Before Harper, you were sad a lot. But now you're happy. Oliver paused, considering. I think she should be our family. Then you won't ever have to be sad again. Out of the mouths of babes, Ethan thought. Out of the mouths of babes. He arrived at Bloom Coffee House 20 minutes early, which was both too much and not enough time to panic. The corner Tyler had reserved was perfect, a quiet nook away from the main traffic, decorated with a small bouquet of purple flowers. Harper's favorite color, thanks to Oliver's intelligence gathering. She walked in at exactly 2 p.m., looking confused but pleased when she spotted him. "What's all this?" she asked, taking in the flowers, the reserved sign, the way he was standing like he might bolt at any moment. "I wanted to take you somewhere special. This is where we had our first date." "I know, that's why it's special." Harper smiled, sliding into the seat across from him. "You're being very mysterious." "Am I? Sorry, I'm nervous." "Nervous about what?" Ethan took a deep breath. He'd rehearsed this moment 100 times in his head, but now that it was here, all his prepared words scattered like leaves in the wind. What remained was simpler, truer. "Do you remember what you asked me that day?" he said. "The first time we sat here?" Harper's brow furrowed slightly. "I asked you a lot of things. You asked me why I really showed up." Recognition dawned in her eyes. "And you said you were tired of being alone, tired of fading." "Yeah." Ethan reached across the table and took her hands. "And then you showed me your scars. And instead of running, I stayed. Because I saw something in you that I recognized. Something that made me think maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to disappear after all." Harper's breath caught. "Ethan, let me finish, please." He squeezed her hands, grounding himself. "This past year has been the best of my life. Not because it was easy, it wasn't. We've both struggled. We've both had to fight for this. But that's what makes it valuable. We didn't just fall into love, we chose it. Over and over again, we chose it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring, his grandmother's ring, holding it up between them. Harper's eyes went wide. "Harper Lane," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the trembling in his chest. "I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm not asking you to have it all figured out. I'm asking you to keep choosing us, to keep showing up, to build a life with me and Oliver, messy and complicated and absolutely real." Tears were streaming down Harper's face, but she was smiling. That luminous, unguarded smile that he'd learned to love more than anything. "Will you marry me?" The question hung in the air between them, fragile and enormous. Ethan felt time stretch, each second lasting a small eternity. And then Harper laughed, a sound that was part sob and part joy and entirely beautiful. "Yes," she said, before he could even finish taking his next breath. "Yes, absolutely yes." Ethan slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, and then he was pulling her across the table, kissing her right there in the middle of the coffee shop where they'd first met, where she'd shown him her scars and he'd promised to stay. Around them, someone started clapping, probably Tyler, who had promised not to spy but clearly had anyway. The sound spread, other customers joining in, a spontaneous celebration of two people who had found their way to each other through fire and fear and the stubborn, beautiful refusal to give up. When they finally pulled apart, Harper was crying and laughing at the same time. "I didn't even let you finish the question," she said. "I noticed. Very rude." "Sorry, I was excited." "I forgive you." Ethan cupped her face in his hands, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "I love you, Harper." "I love you too." She looked down at the ring on her finger, her expression wondering. "We're really doing this. We're really doing this. What about Oliver? Does he know?" "He figured it out himself, actually. This morning. He's already planning the party." Harper laughed again, a sound Ethan wanted to hear every day for the rest of his life. "That kid is something else. He gets it from me. He gets it from somewhere." They sat there in the coffee shop, hands intertwined across the table, the weight of the moment settling around them like a warm blanket. Outside, Portland carried on, cars and people and the endless gray sky. But in their small corner of the world, everything had changed. They were no longer two broken people hoping for something better. They were something new, something whole, a family. The engagement transformed everything and nothing at the same time. Ethan and Harper still woke up to the same alarms, still navigated the same routines of work and childcare and stolen moments. But now there was a weight to their togetherness, a permanence that changed the texture of even the most ordinary days. Harper moved in officially 2 weeks after the proposal, bringing her paintings and her books and the small touches that gradually turned Ethan's bachelor apartment into something that felt like home. She hung her art on walls that had been bare for years. She filled the refrigerator with actual vegetables and ingredients for meals that didn't come from the freezer section. She rearranged the furniture in ways that somehow made the small space feel larger, more welcoming. Oliver helped with the unpacking, appointed himself the official tour guide of his room, and presented Harper with a drawer he had cleared out specifically for her socks. Because, he explained with great seriousness, socks are very important, and now you live here, so your socks need a place. This is the best drawer I've ever had, Harper told him, kneeling down to examine the sacred sock space with appropriate reverence. Thank you, Oliver. You're welcome. Also, I moved Mr. Trumpet to your side of Daddy's bed so you can borrow him if you get scared at night. Harper's eyes glistened. That's very generous. I know, but only borrow. He's still mine. Understood. Watching them together, his son and the woman he loved, Ethan felt something slot into place in his chest, a piece he hadn't known was missing until it was suddenly found. The wedding planning began slowly, shaped by practical considerations and careful choices. Neither Ethan nor Harper wanted anything elaborate. They'd both had enough drama in their lives to last several lifetimes, so they settled on something simple. A garden ceremony at a local venue. Close friends and family only. No fuss, no excessive expense, no pressure to perform happiness for an audience. I just want to marry you, Harper said when they were discussing options one evening. The rest is details. What about your family? Will they come? Harper's expression flickered. Her relationship with her parents had been complicated since the fire. They lived in California and had struggled with the changes in their daughter, unable to reconcile the confident woman they remembered with the scarred survivor she had become. They talked occasionally, sent birthday cards, made promises about visiting that rarely materialized. I'll invite them, she said carefully. Whether they come is up to them. And if they don't, then they don't. I've stopped trying to force people to show up for me. Either they want to be here or they don't. She reached for Ethan's hand, squeezing gently. The people who matter will be there. That's what counts. Ethan thought about his own family situation. His parents were gone, his uncle lived in Florida and rarely traveled. Most of his relatives had scattered to the winds over the years. Tyler would be his best man. A few coworkers from job sites. Marcus, who had become something like a father figure over the years of working together. It would be a small wedding. But small could be beautiful when the people present truly cared. Oliver's already planning his outfit, Ethan said, changing the subject to something lighter. He wants to wear a dinosaur costume. Harper laughed. Of course he does. I talked him down to a regular suit with a dinosaur tie. It was a difficult negotiation. I'm sure it was. What were his demands? That he gets to carry the rings, and that there's dinosaur cake at the reception. Dinosaur cake seems reasonable. That's what I said. We're having T-Rex figurines on top instead of a bride and groom. Harper's eyes sparkled with amusement. I love it, love. I love him. He loves you too. Ethan pulled her closer, tucking her against his side on the couch. He told me the other day that he's glad you're going to be his family. His actual words were, Harper makes things better. He said that? He did. And he's not wrong. Harper was quiet for a moment, her head resting on Ethan's shoulder. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. I never thought I'd have this. A family. A child who actually wants me around. A man who sees all of me and stays anyway. You deserve all of it. You always did. I didn't believe that before. I spent years convinced I was too damaged, too different, too much for anyone to really love. But you and Oliver, you just kept showing up, kept choosing me. And somewhere along the way, I started to believe that maybe I was worth choosing. You are. You always were. I know that now. Harper lifted her head to look at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. That's the gift you gave me, Ethan. Not just love, belief. The belief that I could be loved. Ethan kissed her forehead, his heart so full it ached. That's what love is supposed to do, make you believe in the impossible. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of preparations and decisions. They chose flowers, purple irises and white roses, a compromise between Harper's favorite color and traditional wedding aesthetics. They selected music, a local string quartet for the ceremony, a playlist of meaningful songs for the reception. They wrote their own vows, working on them separately in stolen moments, each trying to capture in words what the other meant to them. Sophie called 2 weeks before the wedding. Ethan was in the middle of reviewing a wiring diagram when his phone rang, her name flashing on the screen. He almost let it go to voicemail. He was busy, and conversations with Sophie were rarely simple, but something made him answer. Ethan, hi. Her voice was tentative in a way he didn't associate with her. Do you have a minute? A few. What's going on? I heard you're getting married. He hadn't told her himself, hadn't thought it was her business, but Oliver had probably mentioned it during one of their weekends together. Kids weren't known for their discretion. I am. In 2 weeks. I wanted to say congratulations. Genuinely. Sophie paused, and Ethan could hear her taking a breath on the other end of the line. And I wanted to apologize. For what? For how I've handled things, the custody demands, the pressure, the way I've made Oliver feel caught in the middle. Her voice was thick now, emotion bleeding through the words. I've been talking to my therapist about it. A lot. And I realized that I was trying to force a connection that I hadn't earned, that I was putting my guilt about the past onto our son's future. Ethan leaned back in his chair, surprised. I appreciate you saying that. I mean it. You've been a good father, Ethan, better than I ever could have been as a mother. And this woman you're marrying, Harper, Oliver, talks about her all the time, how she reads him stories and knows all the dinosaur names and has dragon scales on her arm that make her special. Despite himself, Ethan smiled. He really said that. He did. He loves her. And I think that's wonderful. I think that's exactly what he deserves. Sophie's voice cracked slightly. I spent years being jealous. Jealous of you for being able to do what I couldn't. Jealous of anyone who got to be part of his life when I'd walked away. But that jealousy was just fear dressed up as anger. Fear that I'd lost him forever. You haven't lost him, Sophie. He still asks about you. He still loves you. I know. And I'm going to try to be worthy of that love. Not by demanding more time or taking you to court. I'm dropping all of that. Just by being consistent, showing up, being the mother he needs me to be, even if I can't be the mother I wish I'd been. Ethan felt something shift in his chest. He'd carried so much anger towards Sophie for so long, a weight he'd grown accustomed to carrying. But now, hearing her speak with genuine remorse, genuine self-awareness, he felt that weight begin to lift. That's all any of us can do, he said. Show up, try to be better, hope it's enough. Will you tell Harper I'm happy for you both? I mean it. I really do. I'll tell her. And Ethan, thank you. For being the father Oliver needed when I couldn't be the mother he deserved. For not letting my failures become his. Ethan closed his eyes, unexpected emotion tightening his throat. He's a great kid, Sophie. We both had something to do with that. Maybe. But you did the hard part. She paused. I have to go. Derek's waiting. But I wanted to say all of this before your wedding. I wanted you to know that I'm not going to be an obstacle anymore. Just a co-parent, trying to do better. Thank you, Sophie, really. The call ended and Ethan sat in silence for a long moment, processing what had just happened. Then he called Harper. You'll never guess who just called me, he said. He told her everything, Sophie's apology, her decision to drop the custody demands, her blessing for their marriage. Harper listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she let out a long breath. How do you feel? She asked. I don't know. Relieved, I think, but also sad? Like I'm mourning the version of Sophie I'd built up in my head. The villain. It's easier when people are villains. But she's not a villain. She's just a person who made mistakes and is trying to make amends. Yeah, and that's harder to deal with in some ways. Because it means forgiving her. Ethan considered this. Maybe. Or at least letting go of the anger, which feels like forgiveness, even if it isn't exactly. Letting go is always hard, but it's necessary for you, for Oliver, for all of us. When did you get so wise? Harper laughed softly. I've had a lot of practice letting go of the person I used to be, of the anger about the fire, of all the people who left. Her voice softened. And you know what I learned? The letting go hurts, but the holding on hurts more. At some point, you have to choose which pain you can live with. I choose the letting go, then let go, and come home. Oliver's been asking for you, and I made actual dinner with vegetables. Vegetables? In this house? I know, revolutionary. Now get home before it gets cold. Ethan smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. On my way. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, one of those rare Portland spring days when the clouds parted and the sun actually appeared, as if the weather itself wanted to celebrate. Ethan woke early, too anxious to sleep, and found Oliver already sitting up in bed, clutching Mr. Trumpet. Today's the day, Oliver announced, his eyes wide with excitement. Today's the day, buddy. Is Harper going to be my mommy now? The question hit Ethan in the chest, equal parts sweet and complicated. He sat on the edge of Oliver's bed, choosing his words carefully. Harper is going to be my wife, and she's going to be a very important part of our family. But your mommy is still your mommy. That won't ever change. I know. Oliver's expression was thoughtful, far too mature for his 5 years. But Harper takes care of me like a mommy, and she lives with us, and she reads me stories and makes me feel safe. She does all of those things. So maybe she can be my bonus mommy, like a bonus in a video game, something extra special. Ethan felt tears prick at his eyes. I think Harper would love to be your bonus mommy, but you'll have to ask her. It's her choice too. I'll ask her today, after you put the rings on. That sounds like a good plan. Oliver nodded decisively, then scrambled out of bed with characteristic 4-year-old energy. I need to get my dinosaur tie and try and brush my teeth and practice my ring-carrying walk. Your ring-carrying walk? Miss Diane taught me. It's very slow and serious. Want to see? Oliver proceeded to demonstrate the most solemn, exaggerated walk Ethan had ever witnessed, part funeral procession, part robot, entirely adorable. He watched his son practice carrying an imaginary pillow down an imaginary aisle and felt his heart swell with love. This kid. This ridiculous, wonderful, perfect kid. The ceremony was scheduled for 3 o'clock in a garden venue overlooking the Willamette River. The space was small and intimate, lined with wooden chairs and decorated with purple flowers that caught the afternoon light. A simple arch stood at the far end, wrapped in greenery and white ribbon. Ethan arrived early with Tyler, who was already tearing up despite his best efforts to maintain composure. I can't believe this is happening, Tyler said, straightening Ethan's tie for the 3rd time. My best friend, getting married again, to someone amazing this time. Sophie was wrong for you. Harper is right. Tyler stepped back, surveying his work with satisfaction. You look good, like a man who knows exactly what he's doing. I have no idea what I'm doing. Nobody does at weddings. That's part of the charm. Guests began arriving, Marcus and his wife, Miss Diane looking resplendent in a floral dress, Tyler's sister Jenny with her husband, a handful of Harper's colleagues and support group friends. Maria came, the 15-year survivor who had taken Harper under her wing, her scarred face beaming with pride. Harper's parents didn't come. She'd called them the week before, and they'd made excuses about flight costs and scheduling conflicts, the same excuses they always made. Harper had cried about it once, in private, then squared her shoulders and moved on. The people who matter are here, she'd said. That's enough. And standing at the altar now, watching the small crowd settle into their seats, Ethan realized she was right. The people who mattered, the ones who had shown up consistently, who had witnessed their journey, who genuinely cared about their happiness, they were all present. Quality over quantity, love over obligation. The music started, a gentle melody from the string quartet, and the crowd turned toward the entrance. Oliver appeared first, walking with exaggerated slowness down the aisle, a velvet pillow balanced carefully in his small hands. The rings glinted in the sunlight, secure in their ribbon ties. His dinosaur tie was slightly crooked, his face a mask of intense concentration. Slow and serious, Ethan heard him mutter under his breath. Slow and serious. The crowd chuckled softly, charmed by the small ring bearer's dedication to his craft. Oliver reached the altar, looked up at Ethan with an enormous grin, and gave a thumbs up. "I didn't drop them," he whispered loudly. "Great job, buddy." And then Harper appeared. She wore a simple white dress, elegant but understated, chosen specifically because it didn't have long sleeves. Her scars were visible, catching the light as she walked, and she wore them like jewelry, like art, like the battle marks of a warrior who had survived the fire and emerged transformed. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. A crown of purple flowers nestled in the dark waves. She carried a bouquet of irises and roses, trembling slightly in her grip. And her face was luminous, radiant with a joy that had no room for shame. She walked alone down the aisle, no father to give her away, no attendants at her side, just Harper, moving toward her future under her own power, carrying herself with a dignity that made Ethan's heart stop. Their eyes met across the distance, and everything else faded. The guests, the flowers, the gentle music, none of it mattered. There was only this woman, this moment, this impossible gift of finding each other in a world designed to keep people apart. Harper reached the altar and handed her bouquet to Maria, who had been drafted as an honorary attendant. Then she turned to face Ethan, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi yourself." He took her hands, feeling them tremble in his grip. "You look incredible." "You don't look so bad either." The officiant, a friend of Tyler's who had gotten certified online specifically for this occasion, cleared his throat and began the ceremony. It was brief and heartfelt, punctuated by readings from loved ones and music that had been chosen for its meaning rather than its tradition. And then it was time for the vows. Ethan went first, pulling a folded piece of paper from his pocket with shaking hands. "Harper," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "a year ago, I walked into a coffee shop expecting nothing. I was tired of being alone, tired of just surviving, tired of feeling like I was disappearing into my own life. My best friend had practically dragged me there, convinced that 1 hour of human connection might remind me how to live." He paused, looking into her eyes. "And then you walked in, and you asked me a question no one had ever asked before. Why I really showed up. And I told you the truth because somehow I knew you needed truth, the way I needed it too." Harper's tears were falling freely now, but she was smiling. "You showed me your scars that day, rolled back your sleeve and waited for me to run, and I understood in that moment that we were the same. Both of us carrying wounds we thought made us unlovable. Both of us bracing for rejection. Both of us desperately hoping to find someone who would stay." Ethan's voice cracked, but he pushed through. "I stayed. Not because your scars didn't matter, but because they mattered so much. They told me who you were, a survivor, a fighter, someone who had walked through fire and come out the other side. And I wanted to know that person. I wanted to love that person. I wanted to spend my life with someone who understood that survival isn't just about not dying, it's about finding reasons to keep living." He squeezed her hands, anchoring himself. "You've given me those reasons, Harper. You and Oliver, you've given me a family, a real one, the kind I'd stopped believing in. And I promise, for as long as I live, to keep showing up for you, to see all of you, the beautiful parts and the hard parts, and everything in between, and to love all of you without condition. That's my vow. I'm here to stay." The crowd was sniffling audibly. Tyler was openly crying. Even Marcus, stoic Marcus, who had seen Ethan through every hard moment of the past decade, was wiping at his eyes. Harper took a shaky breath and produced her own folded paper. "Ethan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I spent 4 years after the fire convinced that love wasn't for me anymore. I looked in the mirror and saw someone damaged. I looked at my scars and saw a warning label. I built walls so high that I couldn't see over them, and I told myself that was safer, that being alone was better than being rejected again." She glanced at Oliver, who was watching with rapt attention from his spot by the altar. "And then I met you, and you didn't see a warning label. You saw me, the real me, the scared me, the hopeful me trying so hard not to hope. You reached out and pulled my sleeve back down, not to hide my scars, but to tell me I didn't have to test you. You'd already decided to stay. Her voice strengthened as she continued. I didn't believe you at first. I kept waiting for you to leave. Every fight, every hard conversation, every time I pushed you away, I was sure that would be the moment you finally realized I wasn't worth it. But you never left. You just kept showing up, kept proving that love isn't about perfect people. It's about imperfect people who choose each other anyway. She turned to look at Oliver again, her expression softening. And you gave me something I never thought I'd have. A family. Oliver, you asked me once if my scars made me sad, and I told you they used to. But now they make me proud because they remind me that I survived something terrible. What I didn't tell you is that knowing you makes them beautiful. Because you see them as dragon scales, as something special, and that changed how I see them too. Oliver beamed at her, clutching his ring pillow with fierce pride. Ethan, I promise to love you, not despite who you are, but because of it. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, the hard days and the easy ones, the joy and the grief, all of it. I promise to be a partner to you and a bonus mommy to Oliver and a member of this family for as long as you'll have me. She took a breath, tears streaming down her face. You asked me to keep choosing you, and I will, every day, for the rest of my life. That's my vow. I'm here to stay too. The officiant, visibly moved, cleared his throat and turned to Oliver. I believe we have a ring bearer who's been waiting very patiently. Oliver stepped forward, presenting the pillow with ceremonial gravity. I didn't drop them, he reminded everyone. Laughter rippled through the crowd as Ethan and Harper each took a ring. They slid them onto each other's fingers, simple gold bands, matching, a circle with no end, and held hands as the officiant spoke the final words. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. A pause, a smile. You may kiss the bride. Ethan pulled Harper into his arms and kissed her, deeply, thoroughly, a kiss that contained every moment that had led them here. The coffee shop, the park, the hospital room, the proposal, all of it distilled into a single point of contact. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Oliver tugged on Harper's dress. Harper, can I ask you something? She crouched down to his level, heedless of her white dress touching the ground. Of course, buddy. What is it? Will you be my bonus mommy? Daddy said you could be, if you wanted, like an extra special thing. Harper's face crumpled with emotion. She pulled Oliver into a hug, holding him tight, her voice thick when she finally answered. I would love to be your bonus mommy, more than anything in the world. Good. Oliver hugged her back with the fierce intensity only children possess. Because I already love you, so it makes sense. It makes perfect sense, Harper agreed. Ethan watched them, his wife and his son, wrapped up in each other, forming a family right there at the altar, and felt something crack open in his chest. The last remnant of the wall he'd built after Sophie left, the final piece of armor he'd been carrying without knowing it. He was home. They all were. The reception was held in a tent adjacent to the garden, decorated with fairy lights and more purple flowers, and a cake topped with plastic dinosaur figurines courtesy of Oliver's insistence. Guests mingled and ate and danced, the kind of joyful chaos that weddings at their best could be. Tyler's toast was both hilarious and moving, full of stories about Ethan's journey from heartbroken single dad to the man standing here today. He ended with a simple declaration. I've known this guy since we were 17 years old, and I've never seen him happier. Harper, thank you for bringing my best friend back to life. Marcus spoke too, brief and gruff, his voice cracking as he talked about watching Ethan grow from a scared apprentice into the kind of man who faced his problems head on. You've got a good one here, he told Harper. Don't let him forget it. I won't, Harper promised. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Ethan and Harper found a quiet moment by the edge of the river, watching the sun set over the water. Oliver was playing with Tyler's sister's kids nearby, his dinosaur tie long since abandoned, his jacket covered in cake frosting. We did it, Harper said softly, leaning against Ethan's side. We did. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. How does it feel, being married? The same, but different. like everything shifted slightly and settled into place. She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the fading light. Is that weird? No, that's exactly how it feels. They stood in comfortable silence, watching their son run and laugh, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple, Harper's favorite color, painting the horizon just for her. I used to be afraid of sunsets, Harper said suddenly. Why? They reminded me of fire. All those oranges and reds, I couldn't look at them without remembering. She paused. But now they just look like promise, like the day saying goodbye so tomorrow can happen. That's beautiful. That's healing. She turned to face him fully, taking both his hands. That's what you've given me, Ethan. The ability to see beauty again without the fire getting in the way. To feel hope without waiting for it to be taken away. To believe that good things can last. They can, Ethan said. They will, as long as we keep showing up. Always, Oliver came running toward them, breathless and grass-stained and radiantly happy. Daddy, Harper, bonus mommy. Tyler says it's time to cut more cake. There's still a dinosaur with no head and I get to eat it. Harper laughed, reaching down to ruffle his hair. Then let's go give that dinosaur what he deserves. Oliver grabbed both their hands, pulling them back toward the tent with insistent urgency. And Ethan let himself be pulled, let himself be part of this strange and wonderful unit they'd created. A year ago, he'd been disappearing, fading into the wallpaper of his own life, going through the motions and calling it survival. Now he was here, married, complete, part of a family he hadn't known he was building until it was already built. The tent was bright with fairy lights as they returned, filled with the sound of laughter and conversation, and a 5-year-old demanding his rightful dinosaur head. Harper cut the cake while Oliver supervised, ensuring proper dinosaur distribution. Ethan watched them, his wife and his son, and felt a peace he'd almost forgotten was possible. Later that night, after the guests had gone and Oliver was asleep in the guest room at Tyler's house, a gift of one night alone for the newlyweds, Ethan and Harper stood on the balcony of their hotel room, looking out at the Portland skyline. What are you thinking about? Harper asked. Everything. Nothing. How lucky I am. I think I'm the lucky one. Maybe we're both lucky. Ethan pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her, flowers and something uniquely Harper. Two broken people who found each other at exactly the right moment. Is that what we are? Broken? He considered the question. We were. But I don't think we are anymore. I think we've become something else. Something stronger in the broken places. Harper smiled, lifting her scarred arm into the moonlight. The marks that had once been her shame were silver now, almost beautiful in their strangeness. Dragon scales, she said. Dragon scales, Ethan agreed. They stayed on the balcony until the moon was high, talking and laughing and simply being together. And when they finally went inside, closing the door on the world, Ethan carried with him the certainty that he had found what he'd been looking for. Not perfection, not a fairy tale, but something better. A love that had been through fire and survived. A family built on choice rather than chance. A life worth showing up for. The next morning, they picked up Oliver from Tyler's house and drove home as a family. Oliver chattered the whole way about his sleepover, about the cake, about how everyone had told him he did an amazing job with the rings. I know, he said seriously. I practiced a lot. You were the best ring bearer ever, Harper told him. I know that too. They pulled into the driveway of their apartment, their home, the three of them, and Ethan turned off the engine. For a moment, no one moved. They just sat there together in the quiet after everything. So, Oliver said finally, what do we do now? Ethan looked at Harper. Harper looked at Ethan, and then they both smiled. Now, Ethan said, we live. And they did. Not perfectly, not without struggles. There would still be hard days ahead, still challenges to face, still growth required from all of them. But they faced it together, as a family, showing up for each other, choosing each other, building something beautiful from the broken pieces of their separate pasts. 1 year later, on the anniversary of their first meeting at Bloom Coffee House, Ethan brought Harper and Oliver back to that same corner table. The same booth where she'd rolled back her sleeve and shown him her scars. the same spot where he'd chosen to stay. "Remember this place?" he asked Oliver, who was now 6 and even more opinionated about everything. "This is where you met Bonus Mommy, and she showed you her dragon scales, and you decided she was special." Harper laughed, her eyes glistening. "That's one way to tell the story." "That's the best way," Oliver declared, "because it's true." They ordered coffee, real coffee for the adults, a hot chocolate for Oliver, and sat together in the afternoon light. Harper's latest painting was hanging in a gallery downtown, part of a series about survival and transformation. Ethan had been promoted to lead electrician on a major commercial project. Oliver had started kindergarten and was already teaching his classmates about dinosaurs with evangelical fervor. Life had continued, as life does. But it continued together. "I have something for you," Harper said, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a small canvas, hand-sized, and set it on the table between them. It was the painting she'd showed Ethan the night he proposed, the 3 figures, the man and the child and the woman with dragon scales. But she'd added something to it, a small heart, painted in gold, hovering above them all. "I finished it," she said. "It took me a while to figure out what was missing, but now I know." Ethan looked at the heart, then at Harper, then at Oliver, who was trying to steal marshmallows from his hot chocolate. "It's perfect," he said. "It's us," Harper corrected. "We're perfect. Not because we don't have flaws, but because we fit. Our broken pieces fit together, and they make something whole." "That's what I said." "No, you said perfect. I said us. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" Harper smiled, the same radiant smile that had stopped his heart that first day, the smile that still took his breath away a year later. "Perfect is impossible," she said. "Us is real." Ethan pulled her close and kissed her, right there in the coffee shop where they'd begun, while Oliver made exaggerated gagging sounds, and the afternoon sun streamed through the windows. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was better than that. It was 2 survivors and a small boy with a dinosaur obsession finally building a life where no one had to disappear. Where showing up was enough. Where love wasn't about being perfect,